Imagine yourself standing on the banks of a mighty river, a river that has flowed for thousands of years, carving its way through the heart of a land where history whispers through the wind and the earth. The Nile River, the lifeblood of ancient Egypt, stretches before you, its surface calm and glistening beneath the soft light of dawn. The sound of the river's gentle flow is accompanied by the faint rustling of the papyrus stalks, whispering secrets from ages past. The world around you is both ancient and alive, steeped in a rhythm that has changed little over millennia. And imagine the steady rhythms of life as it unfolded in the fields, the workshops, and the bustling streets of Egypt's ancient cities. We'll walk beside them as they toil under the sun, and share in the quiet dignity of their labor. Then, we aloud take a moment to pause and reflect on the power dynamics at play: the grand rulers and the quiet workers. From here, we'll move into the world of the pharaohs themselves, exploring the contrasting lives of those who lived in luxury and power. We will delve into the mysteries of Egyptian burial practices, where the line between life and death blurred in the most extraordinary ways, and finally we will turn our gaze toward the pyramids themselves, those towering monuments to eternity and the complex society that allowed them to exist. You will travel with the workers who tended the fields, the artisans who shaped the tools and crafts that sustained society. As we begin our journey, allow the sounds of the world around you to fade, and focus on the stories that have been hidden in the sands of time. Let the rhythm of life in ancient Egypt wash over you, a quiet, steady pulse that invites you to relax, to listen, and to drift into a deeper understanding of this ancient world, and the farmers who cultivated the land year after year in the hope that the next harvest would bring the fruits of their labor. It is a rhythm that beats quietly in the lives of those who lived here, the farmers, workers, and artisans whose stories are often overshadowed by the grand tales of kings and queens, of gods and myths. On the horizon, the first rays of the sun warm the earth, casting long shadows over the fields that stretch endlessly in every direction. It is here, in the quiet hum of this ancient landscape, that we begin our journey, a journey that will take us beyond the grand pyramids and towering obelisks, and into the very heart of daily life in Egypt. As you step closer to the water, the scent of damp earth and the subtle fragrance of blooming reeds fill the air. In the shadows of the towering monuments and the legend of pharaohs, there is another story, a story of the countless people who worked tirelessly, day after day, to build the civilization that would one day capture the world's imagination. They are the unsung heroes, the backbone of ancient Egypt, whose lives were shaped not by the grandeur of palaces or temples, but by the more humble, yet equally essential, rhythms of work and survival. Their stories are quiet, yet profound stories of resilience, patience, and quiet determination. Today, we will step into their world. You will feel the warmth of the sun on your skin, hear the sounds of tools in motion. In our exploration, we will begin with the daily lives of these people, those who lived and worked under the ever-watchful eye of the pharaohs, but whose names have long since been forgotten. Each of these segments will gently guide you into the next, like the flow of the Nile, seamless and steady, bringing you closer to the heart of ancient Egypt. Imagine yourself standing at the water's edge, as the soft morning light begins to touch the world. The Nile, the lifeblood of Egypt, stretches before you, its waters cool and dark as it winds its way through the heart of this ancient land. As the first rays of the sunrise, they warm the earth, casting a golden glow across the horizon. As you stand there, you can feel the coolness of the air and the soft dampness of the ground beneath your feet. The scent of the river's waters is clean and earthy, tinged with the fragrance of fresh reeds that line the banks. The early light casts long, soft shadows across the earth, marking the passage of time as the workers prepare for the day ahead. There is a certain rhythm to their movements, as though their bodies are in tune with the land around them. Every year, the river floods, bringing life-giving water and fertile silt to the land. This annual flooding is both a blessing and a challenge, a rhythm of nature that the people have come to depend on. Faith that the river will flood at the right time, that the sun will shine when needed, and that the harvest will come. The rhythm of their lives is unhurried, but steady, each task done with care, each moment a part of the greater cycle of life. They know that their labor, though unseen by the grand world, is what keeps the heart of Egypt beating. It is a life that, though simple, is rich in meaning. They are the builders of this land, the hands that bring the soil to life, and their work, though humble, is no less significant than the towering monuments that rise from the earth. It is a daily cycle of hope and patience, and as the sun continues its climb into the sky, the workers' day stretches before them, a day of labor, but also a day of purpose. It is as though the river is breathing for them, its cyclical rise and fall shaping their existence. The floodwaters nourish the soil, allowing the farmers to plant their crops. The sun climbs higher, and with it, the rhythm of life in ancient Egypt continues. Steady, unhurried, and eternally bound to the river's breath. The water's retreat leaves behind a rich layer of silt, perfect for growing wheat, barley, and flaxter, essential crops that sustain Egypt's people. The first task of the morning is the washing of hands and face with the cool waters of the river, refreshing after the long hours of sleep. The water feels fresh against the skin, cleansing the weariness from the body and preparing it for the work that lies ahead. This moment of quiet cleansing is followed by the dressing ritual, as men and women don simple linen tunics. The linen is light and breathable, perfect for the warm climate, and the workers' garments are often stained with the dust of the earth, a constant reminder of the labor they perform. It is a smell that speaks of life and growth, of the fertile earth that nourishes the crops and sustains the people. The reeds along the riverbank rustle softly in the breeze, adding to the symphony of quiet sounds that fill the air. The life of the village begins to stir, and workers make their way to the fields, tools in hand, ready to tend the crops that will feed Egypt. Their lives are tied to the river's rhythm, and their success depends on its annual flooding. In the early morning hours, as they step out into the fields, they are already thinking of the water. They walk the soft earth, their feet sinking slightly into the soil, as they begin their work plowing, planting, and tending to the land that gives them life. The sound of their plows cutting through the earth is steady, a quiet reminder that they, too, are part of the great rhythm of the land. The mist rising from the river creates a veil, softening the edges of the world and making everything seem calm, as though the land itself is still waking up. The air is still and quiet, save for the gentle ripple of the water and the distant calls of birds. In the distance, the towering sand dunes of the desert stretch endlessly, their golden peaks softened by the haze of morning mist. The Nile is not just a river, it is the very heartbeat of Egypt, a presence that breathes life into the land. The soft murmur of the water as it moves is almost like a quiet lullaby, a soothing sound that has accompanied the people of Egypt for thousands of years. It is the river's breath that brings vitality to this land, filling the soil with nutrients during the annual flooding. This rhythm of the river, rising and falling, controls the pulse of life in Egypt, governing the seasons, the harvests, and the lives of the people who depend on it. The early morning is a time of stillness, a quiet moment before the busy day begins. As the sun climbs higher, the mist dissipates, and the light sharpens. This is the signal that a new day has begun. The world of ancient Egypt stirs into motion. In the modest homes built from mud brick and thatch, the sounds of life gradually awaken. The quiet hum of the village becomes louder voices calling to one another. The gentle sound of the wind rustling through the palm trees, and the rhythmic steps of workers making their way to the fields. From within these homes, the aroma of simple meals begins to drift into the cool morning air. The smell of freshly baked bread, the sharp scent of onions, and the savory fragrance of garlic. These are the scents of everyday life, the things that bring comfort and warmth to a day that will soon be filled with toil. In these homes, the workers, farmers, artisans, and laborers rise with the dawn. Their routines are simple but vital to their survival. The sound of early birds fills the air, their gentle calls rising in the stillness, adding to the peaceful atmosphere of the morning. The relationship between the people of Egypt and the Nile is symbiotic, a quiet partnership that sustains life. Farmers live in constant harmony with the river's flow, watching its rise and fall with the same attentiveness they give to the crops they grow. The work is slow and methodical, but it is also a work of faith. As the day unfolds, the workers move into their routines. Their actions a quiet dance that has been passed down through generations. And so, as the morning light continues to spread across the land, the workers of Egypt begin their day, their hearts in tune with the river's pulse, ready to face whatever the day may bring. The work of the farmer in ancient Egypt is a quiet, steady rhythm, one that is shaped by the land itself. Early in the morning, as the soft light of dawn stretches across the horizon, the farmers emerge from their humble homes and step onto the land that sustains them. Their bare feet sink slightly into the cool, damp soil still moist from the river's flooding. The texture of the soil changes with each pass of the plow. The farmers move along the furrows, carrying small bundles of seed-sweet barley and flax, each one essential to the survival of the community. The sky above is clear, and the sun's warmth spreads across the land, filling the air with a sense of purpose. With each seed planted, the farmers are reminded of the cycles of life that govern their existence. The farmers must wait for the river's floodwaters to arrive, and they rely on the rhythm of the Nile to determine the success of their crops. It is a challenge they face every year, but it is also a cycle they have learned to live with. Pests, for example, can destroy entire crops in a matter of days. Each day, the farmers return to the fields, continuing the cycle of planting, tending, and harvesting. With each seed they plant, they are reminded of the passage of time and the hope that the next harvest will bring the fruits of their labor. The steady rhythm of their work becomes a part of them, a part of the land itself. It is a rhythm that is as old as Egypt, and as enduring as the river that flows through it. The winds, too, can dry out the soil or bring with them the dust of the desert, which can damage the crops. But despite these challenges, the farmers continue their work. They rise early each morning, plow the fields, plant the seeds, and tend to the crops, knowing that their labor is essential to the survival of their families and their community. Their work is steady, constant, and unwavering, a daily struggle, yes, but one that is filled with hope and purpose. The rhythm of the seasons, the rising and falling of the Nile, is a natural part of their existence. They have learned to adapt, to work with what nature provides, and to trust that the land will give back what they put into it. Too little water, and the seeds will not germinate. Too much, and the fields may become flooded and unusable. The unpredictability of the river's rise and fall is a constant worry. Every year, the farmers hold their breath, hoping that the floodwaters will come at the right time, with just the right amount of water. The rhythm of life is often shaped by forces beyond their control. There is a rhythm to it all: the planting, the growing, the harvest. It is a rhythm that has been passed down through generations, one that is deeply rooted in the land itself. These crops will not only feed the people, but will provide the materials for clothing and other daily necessities. Wheat provides the grain for bread, barley is used for brewing beer, and flax is woven into linen for clothing. Each crop requires its own care and attention, and the farmers know that their success depends on their ability to work in harmony with the natural world. The steady growth of these crops is a testament to their labor, but it is also a reminder of the delicate balance between nature and humanity. The farmers tend to their fields with care, watching over the young shoots as they begin to push through the earth, reaching for the sun. The process of planting is slow and deliberate. The seeds are carefully placed into the furrows, each one nestled into the soft soil with the precision of a skilled hand. The farmer's fingers move quickly, but with a rhythm that mirrors the natural world. They are not rushing. They are in sync with the earth, the movement of the plow, and the cycle of the seasons. At first, the earth is damp and heavy, clinging to the wood of the plow. But as the day progresses, the soil dries slightly under the warming sun, becoming more crumbly and easy to work with. Each furrow created by the plow holds the promise of lives of the wheat, barley, and flax that will soon grow from these fields. The farmers guide the oxen with quiet commands, their voices steady and calm, speaking in the language of the land itself. The air smells of earth, rich and deep, with a faint trace of the wet reeds along the riverbank. The scent of the land is ever present, as constant as the river's flow, and it is the smell of life itself. The first task of the day is the plowing of the fields. With simple wooden plows, the farmers begin their work. The plows are pulled not by machinery but by oxen-strong, patient creatures that have been yoked to the task for centuries. The oxen's steady footsteps create a rhythm that echoes across the field, a sound that is familiar and soothing, almost meditative. The wood of the plow creaks as it moves through the earth, cutting deep furrows into the soil. Each turn of the plow requires effort, an effort that is felt in the muscles of the farmer as they push the wooden handles, guiding the plow with the force of their arms and shoulders. The ground beneath them is soft but firm, and as the plow cuts through it, the smell of fresh earth rises into the air, a scent both grounding and nourishing. As the plow moves forward, the earth is turned over, revealing its rich, dark interior. Once the fields are plowed, it is time for the planting. The quiet sound of seeds falling into the soil blends with the distant calls of animals and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. The crops they plant are the foundation of their lives. But while the work of planting is rewarding, it is not without its challenges, and yet they persevere. For the farmers of ancient Egypt, the uncertainty of the floodwaters is just another part of their daily lives. In addition to the unpredictable nature of the floods, there are other challenges that the farmers must face. The work of farming is not easy, but it is rewarding in its own way. The rhythm of life is one of perseverance. In the heart of ancient Egypt, Where the earth meets the sky, there exists a quieter, more delicate rhythm, the rhythm of the artisans. These skilled craftsmen work with a variety of material: stone, metal, clay, and wood, transforming raw elements into objects of beauty and utility. Unlike the large-scale labor of the farmers or the grandeur of the Pharaohs' courts, the artisans' workshops hum with a different kind of energy. Here, the sound of chisels striking stone fills the air, and the rhythmic clanging of hammers against metal rings out in a steady beat, like a heartbeat that echoes through the stone walls of the city. In these workshops, the smell of smoldering fires from the blacksmith's forge mixes with the earthy scent of clay and the faint, sharp taps of metal and turquoise, shaping them with tools that are as delicate as the metal itself. The jeweler uses a small chisel to cut fine designs into the metal. Young apprentices begin their training under the watchful eyes of experienced craftsmen. They spend years learning the delicate art of shaping and creating, beginning with the most basic techniques before moving on to more advanced skills. These craftsmen are the unseen hands that create the tools, the pottery, the jewelry, and the statues that are used in everyday life. But from the knowledge that what they do is essential to the survival and flourishing of society. In their quiet, steady labor, they contribute to the beauty, functionality, and soul of the civilization, leaving behind a legacy that will endure for centuries. The artisans are not just creating objects, they are creating the very foundation of Egyptian culture. Without them, the temples would remain empty, the fields would be without tools, and the people would have no vessels to carry their grain or water. They are, in many ways, the silent architects of the civilization, working with their hands to build the world that Egypt would become. Though their names may not be recorded in the grand annals of history, their creations are woven into the fabric of Egyptian life. A potter's vessel might hold the grain that feeds a family. A jeweler's ring might adorn the finger of a noble or a pharaoh. Every piece they create serves a purpose, and in doing so, it becomes part of the world around them. Under the guidance of their masters, they learn not only the technical aspects of their craft, but also the philosophy behind it. The understanding that each piece they create is part of something greater, a small but significant piece of the vast tapestry of Egyptian civilization, and then uses heat to soften the gold or silver, shaping it into rings, necklaces, and bracelets. The artisans' workshops become places of learning, where skills are honed, traditions are maintained, and the art of creation is kept alive. The apprenticeship is not just about learning how to make objects, but about becoming part of a legacy that stretches back through time, to the very beginnings of Egyptian civilization. Each piece is meticulously crafted, with delicate strands of gold shaped into intricate patterns. Every curve and twist a testament to the jeweler's skill. The jewels are then carefully set, sometimes in elaborate patterns that represent the gods or the natural world, or simply in designs that evoke beauty and harmony. It's a scent of creation, of work in progress, of something being born from nothing. The jeweler works slowly, with focus and patience, using tools that are small and precise. It is a process that requires great care and dedication, for each piece must be perfect. And when it is finished, the jewelry sparkles with a rich glow of gold and precious stones, ready to adorn the people who wear it, marking them as part of a society that values beauty and craftsmanship. The artisans, like the farmers, are connected to the land, but their connection is through the materials they shape with their hands. They take what is rough and raw and transform it into something functional and beautiful. Each piece crafted with intention and care. The items they produce are as varied as the materials they use: pottery for daily use, tools for the fields, jewelry for adornment, and statues to honor the gods. Pottery, essential for storing grain, water, and oil, is carefully molded by hand, the clay spun into shape on a potter's wheel. Then, they are fired in kilns, where the heat hardens the clay, making it sturdy and durable. The firing process is delicate, requiring careful attention. The potter must judge the right temperature, ensuring that the pottery is fired just long enough to reach its strength without cracking or warping. Once fired, the pottery is often decorated with simple, yet elegant designs, geometric patterns, or representations of the gods. These paintings are done by hand, using natural dyes that come from the earth itself. The potter's brush moves with grace, adding the finishing touch to a creation that will be used in everyday life, perhaps for generations to come. With each turn, the potter's hands move with precision, their fingers shaping the clay into smooth, even forms. As the wheel spins, the potter's hands glide along the surface, smoothing out the lumps and imperfections, coaxing the shape into being. The air is thick with the earthy scent of the clay, which seems to breathe with life under the potter's touch. Once the pots are formed, they are left to dry in the warm sun. The process of jewelry making is even more intricate. The jeweler begins with raw materials: gold, silver, lapis lazuli. Behind these creations, there is a system of learning and mentorship that has been passed down for generations. Through this apprenticeship system, knowledge is preserved and passed from one generation to the next. The work of the artisan, though often quiet and humble, is of immense importance to the society. There is a quiet dignity in their work, a dignity that comes not from fame or recognition. So, while the artisans may never be celebrated in the grand halls of history, their work is no less important than the work of kings and queens. As the sun begins its slow descent beyond the horizon, the heat of the day starts to fade, giving way to the cool embrace of evening. The golden light of the setting sun spills across the land, casting long, soft shadows over the fields that were once filled with the steady rhythm of labor. The air is now gentler, less oppressive. As the workers, those whose hands have shaped the earth, begin to make their way home, the aroma of freshly baked bread fills the air, mingling with the earthy scent of lentils and onions as they cook over a small fire. There is no grandeur to the meal, no elaborate feasts, only the comforting, familiar taste of what has been grown and prepared with care. It is a cycle that repeats, day after day, as natural and constant as the rise and fall of the sun. They twinkle softly, their quiet brilliance, offering a reminder of the vastness of the world beyond the simple lives of the workers. The workers, lying on mats made from reeds, close their eyes and drift into sleep, knowing that the land will wake them once again at dawn. In the stillness of the night, there is comfort in the knowledge that tomorrow will be much like today, the same routines, and the same quiet determination that fills the heart of Egypt. The workers know that tomorrow will bring another day of toil, another day of cultivating the land, of creating, of sustaining. The quiet dignity of their labor is not forgotten, even as they sleep. Tomorrow they will rise again with the sun, and the cycle will begin once more, as steady and unbroken as the river's flow. The sun will rise once again, and with it, the rhythm will begin anew. Majestic figures who ruled over them, the pharaohs of Egypt, whose lives were filled with grandeur and responsibility, yet in many ways were just as bound to the cycles of the land as the common folk. The food is nourishing, but it is the shared moments around the meal that bring the true sense of comfort. The workers sit together with their families, sharing stories from the day, talking about the small triumphs and the challenges faced. There is laughter, soft and genuine, as the warmth of the food spreads through their body. And for a few moments, the worries of the day seem to fade away. Their bodies are tired from the day's labor, but their steps are steady. Their movements a reflection of the quiet strength that has sustained them through the hours of toil. The landscape, once vibrant with the energy of the day, now takes on a different tonkama, more introspective. The workers leave behind the fields and workshops, walking along narrow dirt paths toward their modest homes, made of mud brick and palm fronds. These homes, simple and unadorned, offer shelter from the growing coolness of the evening air. The soft murmur of voices fills the air as families gather together, the rhythm of their conversations like the gentle ebb of the river. The labor of the day is done, and now it is time to rest. At home, the evening meal is simple but satisfying. As the last rays of sunlight disappear, the cool darkness of night takes its place, and the world outside the humble homes becomes still. The sounds of the evening drift through the air, children's laughter as they play in the fading light, the soft rustle of leaves as the evening breeze dances through the trees, and the gentle murmur of voices as families settle in for the night. The world is peaceful now, the intensity of the day replaced by the calm of evening. The rhythm of the day has come full circle: work, rest, and preparation for tomorrow's labor. As the night deepens, the sky above begins to darken, the stars slowly appearing in the vast expanse. And so, as the evening settles in, the workers of ancient Egypt rest, their bodies and minds preparing for another day. The calm of the night gives way to the gentle transition into the next chapter of our journey, where we shift our focus from the daily life of the workers to the powerful Cleopatra the Seventh. The last active ruler of the Ptolemaic dynasty of Egypt was born into a kingdom at the crossroads of history at the very intersection of Greece and Rome. Her family had ruled Egypt for nearly 3 centuries, following the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC. The grandeur of Egypt's previous reigns was slipping away, and the kingdom was caught in the growing tension between the expanding Roman Empire and the remnants of Greek influence. She was multilingual, speaking several languages, including Egyptian, remarkable for a Ptolemaic ruler, as most of her ancestors had preferred Greek Egypt. In the years leading up to her reign, was politically fractured. It was a turbulent time rife with political betrayals, alliances, and the continual undermining of royal authority. Her struggle to regain the throne was marked by her determination to overcome familial divisions and the power struggles that engulfed her court. It was this fractured political environment that would lead Cleopatra to seek external support from the might of Rome, a decision that would alter the course of both Egyptian and Roman history. Upon her father Ptolemy XII's death, Cleopatra was thrust into a world of intrigue and instability. A queen facing both internal turmoil and external threats, she would soon engage in a dance of diplomacy and alliances with the most powerful men of her time, marking the beginning of her remarkable journey. Its economy was deeply reliant on the Nile River, which provided the fertile soil necessary for agriculture, primarily wheat, barley, and flax. Egypt's once imposing military and naval strength had weakened over the years, and the Ptolemies had become increasingly reliant on Roman support to maintain their grip on power. Rome's influence in Egypt was growing, not only due to its military might, but also because of economic ties. As Egypt's grain was essential to the Roman Empire, Cleopatra inherited a kingdom that was rich in resources but fragile politically. As she rose to power, she faced the challenge of revitalizing Egypt's ancient strength, while navigating the ever-growing pressure from Rome. These crops were essential not only for feeding the population, but also for sustaining trade with other nations. Yet, through all the uncertainty, she remained focused on her goal: to restore Egypt's position as a powerful and independent entity in the Mediterranean world. At just 18 years old, she was already learning the complexities of leadership, diplomacy, and survival in an environment where both internal and external forces threatened her reign. The Nile's predictable flooding was a boon for agriculture, but it also posed a threat if the flooding was too low, risking famine and economic collapse. She was crowned queen alongside her younger brother Ptolemy XIII, as was the custom of the Ptolemies, who often married within their family to consolidate power. Cleopatra, however, was the true heir to the throne, having been her father's chosen successor. But her younger brother, under the influence of his advisors, rejected her authority and sought to rule alone. This ability to speak the language of her subjects was crucial in securing her position as a ruler who would be connected to both her Egyptian heritage and the broader Greek and Roman worlds. Her education was not limited to language. She was well versed in the arts, philosophy, and science, and she studied under some of the most accomplished scholars of Alexandria, a city renowned for its intellectual achievements. Cleopatra, born around 69 BCE, entered this world not as a mere symbol of Egypt's fading glory, but as a young woman who would, through her intelligence, diplomacy, and charisma, attempt to restore Egypt's greatness. Alexander's empire was divided among his generals, and Ptolemy I, one of these generals, took control of Egypt, founding the Ptolemaic dynasty. From the outset, the Ptolemies were Greek rulers, and they maintained Greek customs and language despite ruling over a predominantly Egyptian population. By Cleopatra's time, the dynasty had lost much of its former power, and Egypt's role in the Mediterranean world had shifted. Cleopatra's lineage, though once one of tremendous power and wealth, was now in decline. Raised in the royal palace of Alexandria, Cleopatra was well educated in the traditions of her people, but also exposed to the political and philosophical currents of the Mediterranean world. However, Cleopatra's ascent to power was not a smooth one. This division led to open conflict, with Cleopatra being forced into exile. Egypt itself, though once an empire that stretched across much of the Mediterranean, had seen better days. By Cleopatra's ascension, Egypt had become vulnerable to the growing influence of Rome. In these early years, Cleopatra was forced to contend with the political turmoil that threatened both her kingdom and her family's legacy. Cleopatra's background, political context, and the state of Egypt laid the groundwork for her extraordinary reign. Cleopatra's rise to power was not a smooth or predictable path. It was marked by political intrigue, family rivalries, and strategic alliances that ultimately brought her to the throne of Egypt. When her father died, Cleopatra was only 18 years old, and she was named co-ruler with her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, who was about 10 years old. While it was customary in the Ptolemaic dynasty for siblings to rule together, the relationship between Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII was far from harmonious. Instead, it became a critical turning point in her life. At this time, Caesar was embroiled in a civil war with his political rival, Pompey the Great. After his defeat, sought refuge in Egypt, hoping to find sanctuary. However, in a brutal show of political calculation, Ptolemy XIII's advisors, seeking to align themselves with Caesar, decided to present Pompey's head to Caesar as a gift. The two shared a passion for power and an understanding of how to wield it. With Caesar's support, she reasserted her authority, but she did not merely rule as a puppet of Rome. Instead, she positioned herself as an independent queen, a ruler who could both navigate the complexities of Roman politics and defend her kingdom's sovereignty. Cleopatra's ability to charm Caesar, forge an alliance with him, and ultimately regain her throne marks the beginning of one of the most fascinating reigns in history. The stage was now set for her to not only preserve Egypt's autonomy, but also to secure her place as one of history's most intriguing and powerful women. Over time, Cleopatra and Caesar's bond grew stronger, both politically and romantically. Cleopatra's ability to charm Caesar was undeniable, but it was her political acumen and ability to navigate the complexities of Egyptian and Roman relations that truly solidified their connection. Caesar, in turn, provided Cleopatra with the military support she needed to defeat her brother's forces. With his backing, Cleopatra returned to Alexandria, and after a brutal conflict, regained control of Egypt. Ptolemy XIII's forces were crushed, and her brother drowned in the Nile while attempting to flee, leaving Cleopatra as the undisputed ruler of Egypt. This gruesome gesture, meant to win Caesar's favor, deeply offended the Roman general and led to him taking direct control of the situation in Alexandria. Cleopatra, an astute political mind with an understanding of the shifting tides of power, recognized that her only chance to regain the throne was through a strategic alliance with the most powerful figure of the time, Julius Caesar. During her exile, Cleopatra used all her intelligence and political cunning to solidify her path forward, understanding that her return to power would require not only military support but also the favor of Rome. Cleopatra, already showing promise as a ruler, took on the mantle of leadership with a clear understanding of the political challenges ahead. However, her brother's advisors, seeking to consolidate their own power, pushed him to claim sole rule, sidelining Cleopatra. Despite being in exile, she recognized that Caesar's displeasure with Egypt's court provided her with an opportunity to align herself with a Roman general. Cleopatra's first move was daring, even by her standards. Knowing that she would need to make an unforgettable impression on Caesar, she hatched a bold plan. She had herself smuggled into Caesar's palace, concealed in a carpet, delivered to Caesar's chambers as a gift. Cleopatra was unrolled from the carpet, a living, breathing queen, her presence as much a symbol of defiance as it was of political brilliance. This set the stage for a bitter power struggle between the two siblings, one that would not only divide Egypt. It was an act of both wit and bravery, a daring move that showcased Cleopatra's ability to think quickly and creatively. As she emerged from the carpet, her regal bearing and calm demeanor immediately impressed Caesar, but it was her intelligence and political insight that won him over. Cleopatra did not rely on her beauty alone. She engaged Caesar in conversation, speaking to him in Greek and discussing Egypt's political situation with clarity and poise. Caesar, already a man of great political ambition and intellect, recognized Cleopatra as a capable ruler who could offer him more than just an alliance. She could provide him with a foothold in Egypt and the possibility of securing Roman interests in the region, but also attract the attention of the most powerful empire in the Mediterranean, Rome. As the daughter of Ptolemy she was born into the ancient Ptolemaic dynasty, a Greek-influenced royal family that had ruled Egypt for nearly 3 centuries. Rome, the emerging superpower, had a growing influence over Egypt's affairs, particularly because of Egypt's vital grain supply, which fed much of the Roman population. In this context, Cleopatra's brother, influenced by his advisors, began to challenge her authority. The situation escalated when Cleopatra, in a bid to strengthen her position, was exiled from the royal palace, forced to flee Alexandria, and ultimately removed from the throne. Her brother assumed control, with Egypt's court and power structure now divided between the supporters of Cleopatra and those loyal to Ptolemy III. By the time Cleopatra ascended to the throne, Egypt's glory had waned, and it stood at a crossroads, torn between its Egyptian heritage and the growing influence of Rome. Cleopatra's story begins with the sudden death of her father in 51 BC, leaving behind a fractured kingdom and a tenuous succession. Cleopatra's early years were spent preparing for a reign that would require not only intelligence and political savvy but also charisma and resilience. The political dynamics in Egypt were volatile. The Ptolemaic dynasty, once a powerful force in the Mediterranean world, had become increasingly weak and dependent on external support. Exiled but not defeated, Cleopatra's time away from the throne did not signal a retreat into obscurity. The moment that would mark the turning point in Cleopatra's destiny came in 48 BCE. Cleopatra, ever the opportunist, saw an opening and seized it. This dramatic entrance captured Caesar's attention in a way that few could have anticipated. Their meeting was the beginning of a deep political and personal alliance. Cleopatra's rise to power, which began with exile and political struggle, culminated in her triumphant return to the throne. The alliance between Cleopatra and Julius Caesar is one of history's most captivating and consequential political relationships. More than a mere romantic partnership, it was a union that blended politics, intellect, and ambition, with far-reaching consequences not only for Cleopatra and Caesar but also for Egypt, Rome, and the Mediterranean world at large. Cleopatra, though young and facing internal strife in Egypt, was able to use her intelligence, diplomacy, and charisma to secure Caesar's favor, which ultimately allowed her to solidify her rule. For Caesar, Cleopatra was not just a foreign queen. She was a strategic ally whose influence over Egypt could bolster his own political aspirations. Once Cleopatra was reinstated as queen, she was able to bring stability to her kingdom with Caesar's help. Officially named Ptolemy the 15th Caesar Caesarion, was presented as the son of Julius Caesar, though there were competing political factions in Rome that denied this claim. For Cleopatra, Caesarion was not just a son but a political tool, a symbol of her alliance with Caesar. By bearing Caesar's child, Cleopatra solidified her bond with him and created a direct link between her reign and the power of Rome. Cleopatra was not just another beautiful, foreign queen. She was a sharp and knowledgeable leader with an understanding of the intricacies of both Egyptian and Roman politics. Her charm, wit, and intelligence captivated Caesar, who was known for his military genius and political astute. But Caesar also valued Cleopatra's ability to engage in the art of diplomacy, her understanding of culture, and her political pragmatism. The birth of Caesarion elevated her status and her legitimacy as a ruler in the eyes of her Egyptian subjects. In their discussions, Cleopatra provided Caesar with a deeper understanding of the dynamics of Eastern politics, including the delicate balance of power between Egypt and Rome. Through their alliance, she introduced Caesar to the idea of the East as a vital part of Rome's future, not just as a region to be conquered, but as a place to engage with. Cleopatra's insights into the complexity of Egyptian society, its culture, and its people gave Caesar a broader view of the Mediterranean world, and in return, she used her relationship with Caesar to stabilize her kingdom and protect its independence. She explained the role Egypt played in the Mediterranean economy, particularly in providing grain to feed Rome, and how its wealth and strategic location made it a vital asset to the Roman Empire. She was well educated in philosophy, mathematics, and science, and could converse with Caesar on intellectual matters. Cleopatra's fluency in several languages, including Greek, Egyptian, and Aramaic, set her apart from the Greek-speaking Ptolemies, and helped her gain the respect of her Egyptian subjects. Their alliance with Egypt was a step toward a more inclusive Roman Empire, one that recognized the value of cultural exchange and political partnerships with the East. Cleopatra, through her intelligence and political savvy, became not only Caesar's ally, but also an influential force in his vision of Rome's future. For Caesar, Cleopatra was more than just a queen. She was a leader who understood the complexities of empire and power, and who could help shape the future of both Egypt and Rome. Together, they created an alliance that would endure far beyond Caesar's death, leaving an indelible mark on history. Cleopatra's political and cultural influence on Caesar was pivotal in how he navigated his relationship with Rome and its expanding borders. Ultimately, the alliance between Caesar and Cleopatra was not just a personal bond. It was a political and intellectual partnership that shaped the course of history in the Mediterranean world. Her multilingualism was a testament to her ability to connect with diverse cultures, which was vital in a world dominated by shifting empires and political alliances. Their combined influence allowed Cleopatra to dismiss her brother's faction and consolidate her control over Egypt. Caesar, who had faced numerous challenges during his rise to power in Rome, saw in Cleopatra not only a capable queen but also a kindred spirit. By forging an alliance with Cleopatra, Caesar embraced the possibility of a broader, more inclusive empire, one that combined the strength of Rome with the cultural richness of Egypt. His understanding of the East and his political vision were influenced by Cleopatra, who helped him navigate the complexities of Egyptian politics and culture. Like him, was willing to do whatever it took to secure her legacy. Their personalities complemented each other. Caesar's ambition and military prowess matched Cleopatra's cunning and political acumen. They were two rulers, each formidable in their own right, but united in their common goals. Cleopatra, though young and inexperienced as a monarch, knew how to use her charm and intellect to win Caesar's favor, and this dynamic fueled their personal and political partnership. While Cleopatra's role as queen was never questioned, Caesar's support allowed her to reinforce her legitimacy and solidify her rule. While he never formally acknowledged Caesarion as his heir in Rome, the existence of the boy complicated Caesar's political relationships in Rome. Caesarion's claim to the throne of Egypt, with his connection to Caesar, could be seen as a challenge to Roman supremacy in the East. Despite the complexities, Caesar's support for Cleopatra remained unwavering. While he may not have openly acknowledged Caesarion as his son in Rome, the political and personal bond between Cleopatra and Caesar was evident. Their relationship was more than just a political alliance. It was a deep connection that transcended the political motives of their respective countries. This partnership, although born out of political necessity, was deeply beneficial to both parties. Cleopatra gained the throne, and Caesar gained an ally who would be loyal to Rome. Together, they formed an alliance that would endure long after Caesar's death and reverberate through history. At the time of their meeting, Cleopatra was only 21 years old and had been thrust into the turmoil of a fractured Egypt. Caesarion's birth gave Cleopatra a political advantage that no other ruler could challenge. A male heir, born of a Roman and Egyptian union, meant that Cleopatra could claim the protection of Rome while maintaining her country's independence. She had succeeded in using the birth of her son to cement her rule and ensure Egypt's future stability. Although she was queen, her control over Egypt was tenuous, especially after her brother Ptolemy XIII had forced her into exile. At the time, Rome was the most powerful force in the Mediterranean, and Caesar's influence reached far beyond Roman borders. Egypt, with its vast resources and strategic location, was critical to Rome's stability. It was a key supplier of grain, which fed much of Rome's population, and controlling Egypt meant controlling the Mediterranean. Though Cleopatra's kingdom was weakened, Caesar saw in her a capable ruler who could help preserve Egypt's importance in the Roman world. He was not seeking to conquer Egypt but to ensure its loyalty and secure Roman interests. This mutual understanding formed a basis of their alliance. For Cleopatra, securing an alliance with such a powerful figure was a bold and calculated move. She saw in Caesar the potential not just to regain her throne but to stabilize Egypt and restore its glory. Cleopatra's throne was not yet firmly established, and she had to rebuild her authority in a kingdom weakened by internal divisions and external threats. When Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria in 48 BCE, Egypt was embroiled in a complex power struggle between Cleopatra and her brother's faction, which had the backing of Egypt's court and military. Cleopatra, however, did not view Caesar simply as a means to reassert her authority. She understood that her reign could be part of something much greater. Caesar, for his part, had a deep understanding of the geopolitical landscape. Together, Cleopatra and Caesar worked to stabilize Egypt's internal affairs. Perhaps the most politically significant event of Cleopatra and Caesar's relationship was the birth of their son. In Egypt, Caesarion's birth was seen as a divine event, with Cleopatra positioning her son as a continuation of the pharaonic line, the legitimate heir to both the ancient Egyptian kingship and the new Roman connection. For Caesar, Caesarion presented a potential problem. Cleopatra and Julius Caesar's relationship was one of intellectual respect and personal admiration. What set Cleopatra apart from other rulers was her ability to combine intellect with personal magnetism. On a personal level, Cleopatra's relationship with Caesar was one of admiration and affection. Caesar's admiration for Cleopatra was also a reflection of his appreciation for Eastern cultures, something that many Romans did not understand or value. Cleopatra's influence on Caesar extended beyond their personal relationship. It shaped his decisions regarding Egypt, Rome, and his broader vision of imperial expansion. But Cleopatra's influence on Caesar was not limited to Egypt's affairs. In many ways, Cleopatra shaped Caesar's approach to Roman politics. The Cleopatra-Caesar alliance was marked by mutual admiration, political calculation, and personal respect. Cleopatra's reign was marked by her exceptional ability to navigate the intricate balance between maintaining Egypt's ancient traditions and implementing reforms that modernized the kingdom. As the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic dynasty, Cleopatra inherited a throne that was fragile and a kingdom that was fragmented politically and economically, and the practical needs of modernization, which were essential to Egypt's survival in a world dominated by Rome. Cleopatra's skill in this balancing act was one of the key factors in her ability to hold on to power and secure her legacy, while the flooding was crucial for replenishing the soil. Inconsistent flooding could also be disastrous. Too much water could destroy crops, and too little would cause famine. She strengthened the kingdom's ties with Rome, capitalizing on Egypt's strategic position as a vital supplier of grain to the Roman Empire. Egypt had long had strong trading relationships with regions such as Arabia, India, and sub-Saharan Africa. The Ptolemaic dynasty had long identified itself with Egypt's ancient religious practices. Even though the dynasty was of Greek origin, Isis represented wisdom, fertility, and the protector of kings, and by presenting herself as the living incarnation of Isis, Cleopatra reinforced her divine right to rule. Rome, with its expanding empire, had its own pantheon of gods, and Cleopatra recognized the importance of maintaining good relations with Roman elite. She often incorporated Roman symbols and deities into her reign to ensure that she was seen as a queen who could bridge the cultural divide between Egypt and Rome. Despite the grandeur of her palace and the luxuries of her royal court, Cleopatra maintained a deep connection with the common people of Egypt. She understood that a ruler's legitimacy rested not only on their political alliances, but also on their ability to resonate with the masses. She worked to engage with Egyptian culture on a personal level. She was often seen participating in religious ceremonies, both to honor the gods and to demonstrate her role as Egypt's divine ruler. This active participation in Egypt's cultural and religious life allowed her to forge a strong connection with the Egyptian populace, who revered her not just as their queen, but also as the embodiment of the country's enduring legacy. For example, she aligned herself with the Roman goddess Venus, often depicted in Roman coinage alongside her own image, symbolizing her connection to both Egyptian and Roman heritage. While she recognized the necessity of political alliances with Rome, she never allowed Roman culture to overshadow Egypt's traditions. She understood that the strength of Egypt lay in its unique identity, and she worked tirelessly to preserve and promote Egypt's customs, art, and religion. She utilized Egyptian religious symbols, such as the scepter. The crown of her reign stands as a period of political and cultural vitality, during which she preserved Egypt's legacy while navigating the complexities of a rapidly changing world. Her economic, religious, and cultural policies demonstrated her remarkable ability to both honor the past and adapt to the future, ensuring that Egypt remained a significant player on the world stage. Her leadership was characterized by an unwavering commitment to her people, her traditions, and the preservation of Egypt's legacy, making her one of the most successful and enduring rulers in Egyptian history. Her strategic use of Roman coins bearing her image alongside that of Caesar and Antony signified not only her role as a queen of Egypt, but also her political alliances with these Roman powers. She regularly interacted with the local priesthood, who held significant influence in Egyptian society, and sought their support for her reign. She also understood the importance of presenting herself as a protector of Egypt's welfare, especially in times of famine or economic distress. Her involvement in agricultural reforms was one of the most direct ways she showed her commitment to the well-being of her people, ensuring that the common folk had access to food and resources during times of hardship. By combining Egyptian religious symbols with Roman imagery, Cleopatra successfully positioned herself as a leader who could appeal to both Egyptian and Roman sensibilities, and Lower Egypt and the Ankh to further solidify her connection to Egypt's ancient traditions. This connection to Isis not only solidified her legitimacy in the eyes of her Egyptian subjects, but also allowed Cleopatra to project an image of divine authority. The pharaohs had traditionally been seen as divine rulers, associated with the gods and responsible for maintaining the cosmic order. Cleopatra, understanding the power of religious symbolism, presented herself as a divine ruler in the tradition of Egypt's great pharaohs. By re-establishing and expanding these trade routes, Cleopatra ensured that Egypt remained an important economic player in the Mediterranean world, even as Rome's power expanded across the region. The stability of Egypt's grain production was essential not only to the Egyptian economy, but also to the political relationship between Cleopatra and Rome. by providing Rome with a steady supply of food. Cleopatra solidified her position as an ally of the Roman Republic, ensuring that Egypt was able to retain a degree of independence while under Rome's influence. Cleopatra initiated reforms in the irrigation network to help regulate the flow of water, ensuring that the floods would be more predictable and that the soil would remain fertile. These efforts were particularly important as Egypt as agricultural economy depended heavily on a stable supply of food, both for the people of Egypt and as a means of sustaining trade with Rome and other regions. Egypt, while rich in culture, had become increasingly dependent on external powers, particularly Rome. Cleopatra understood that to ensure the survival and prosperity of Egypt, she would need to reform certain aspects of the kingdom while remaining deeply rooted in the traditions that had defined her people for centuries. Her reign was a delicate balance between these two worlds. Egypt's ancient customs, which held immense value for her people. One of Cleopatra's most important challenges was stabilizing Egypt's economy, which had been undermined by years of internal strife and external pressures. Egypt's economy was primarily with the Nile River providing the lifeblood of the kingdom through its annual flooding, which replenished the soil and enabled the cultivation of essential crops such as wheat, barley, and flax. Cleopatra recognized that the strength of Egypt's economy lay in its agriculture, and her first priority was ensuring that the Nile's annual flooding was managed effectively to guarantee a prosperous harvest. Cleopatra worked to improve Egypt's irrigation systems to better manage the flooding of the Nile. In addition to agricultural reforms, Cleopatra also worked to ensure that Egypt's trade routes were maintained and expanded. Cleopatra also made efforts to bolster trade with other regions, particularly with the East. As a ruler of Egypt, Cleopatra's relationship with religion and culture was central to her rule. Cleopatra's most significant religious connection was with the goddess Isis, one of the most important deities in the Egyptian pantheon. However, Cleopatra was not simply a ruler who relied on ancient Egyptian traditions. She was also attuned to the growing influence of Roman culture. The most striking example of her ability to merge Egyptian and Roman cultural symbolism was her presentation of herself alongside Julius Caesar and later Mark Antony. One of Cleopatra's most remarkable qualities was her ability to connect with the people of Egypt, a feat that was critical to her success as a ruler. Cleopatra worked hard to be seen as a ruler who was in tune with the needs of her people. Beyond her efforts in stabilizing Egypt's economy, Cleopatra's presentation of herself as a queen deeply connected to Egypt, as traditions also helped her maintain the loyalty of her people. In addition, Cleopatra sought to preserve Egypt's cultural identity in the face of growing Roman influence. Cleopatra's ability to balance the ancient customs of Egypt with the demands of Roman politics, while maintaining a connection to her people, was a testament to her skill as a ruler. Cleopatra's rule was defined by her ability to remain firmly anchored in Egypt, as ancient traditions while embracing reforms that ensured the kingdom as survival in the face of Roman expansion. The relationship between Cleopatra and Mark Antony is one of the most complex and politically charged alliances in ancient history. What began as a political union ultimately became a deeply personal and passionate partnership, with far-reaching consequences for both the individuals involved and the future of the Roman Empire. Caesar's death had thrown Rome into chaos, and the struggle for power was now between the two most powerful men. Rome, Antony, and Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir. After Caesar's death, Antony had been appointed as one of the key leaders in Rome. He was intrigued by her both as a ruler and as a woman. Cleopatra, ever the strategist, approached Antony not only as a potential lover, but also as a political ally. She knew that securing his loyalty would be crucial to maintaining Egypt's independence, and she immediately set about making her case to him. Antony, meanwhile, was both captivated by her beauty and intrigued by her intelligence. The two rulers, both deeply aware of the political implications of their union, worked to consolidate their power in the Mediterranean. To many Romans, Cleopatra was an outsider, a foreign queen whose power and influence were seen as a threat to Roman supremacy. They had 3 children together: Alexander Harlias, Cleopatra Selene. These children represented the blending of two great powers, the East and Pharaonic tradition and the Roman Empire. The children were positioned as heirs to both Roman and Egyptian thrones, further emphasizing the importance of the alliance. Cleopatra Selene would later go on to become Queen of Mauritania, forging a new dynastic link between her family and the rulers of North Africa. Their relationship represented a direct challenge to the power of Octavian, who, as Caesar's adopted heir, viewed Antony's alliance with Cleopatra as a direct threat to Rome's dominance. He painted Cleopatra as a manipulative foreign queen who had bewitched Antony, and the Roman public's distrust of Antony deepened. Octavian's propaganda campaign turned public sentiment in Rome against Antony, and his political support began to wane. Octavian, a master of propaganda, seized upon the growing public perception of Antony's relationship with Cleopatra to undermine his rival. This decisive naval battle was a turning point in the power struggle for control of the Roman Empire. Despite their combined forces, Antony and Cleopatra were defeated by Octavian's fleet, marking the end of their political and military ambitions. Cleopatra and Antony retreated to Egypt, where their fate was sealed. In 30 BCE, after hearing of Antony's death, Cleopatra took her own life, marking the end of both their reigns and the Ptolemaic dynasty. He portrayed Antony as a traitor to Rome, willing to submit to the will of a foreign queen and jeopardize Rome, his power in favor of his relationship with Cleopatra. The birth of these children was not merely a personal event. It had profound political implications. By presenting her children as heirs to both Egypt and Rome, Cleopatra ensured that her lineage would endure beyond her reign. Her son, Caesarion, had already been linked to Julius Caesar, and Antony's children further solidified her family's connection to Rome. Cleopatra and Antony's alliance, once a beacon of power and hope for Egypt, ended in tragedy. The end of their reigns marked the end of Egypt's independence, as it was absorbed into the Roman Empire. Yet, Cleopatra and Antony's legacy remains one of the most intriguing and dramatic chapters in history. A story of love, ambition, and political maneuvering that would reverberate through the ages. However, their legacy lived on through their children, their impact on Roman politics, and the myth of their love and ambition that continued to captivate the world for centuries. By having children with Cleopatra, Antony strengthened his ties to Egypt and solidified the alliance between the two powers. Antony, in aligning himself with her, risked alienating his political allies and facing opposition from those who viewed his relationship with Cleopatra as a betrayal of Roman interests. It was a marriage of political necessity. Antony, while a successful general and politician, knew that Cleopatra's influence over each one of the richest and most strategically important regions in the world was invaluable. By aligning himself with her, he secured the loyalty of Egypt and a powerful ally in the East. What began as a political encounter quickly blossomed into a partnership that would combine both romance and political calculation. Octavian, who had long viewed Antony's relationship with Cleopatra with suspicion, saw the children as a direct challenge to his power. Antony's decision to name Cleopatra's children as his heirs, and to present them as potential rulers of both Rome and Egypt, was a direct threat to Octavian's ambitions. The political implications of this alliance, coupled with Cleopatra's growing influence over Antony, created an atmosphere of tension and distrust between the two factions. Cleopatra was not merely a queen. She was a formidable political player who had already proven her ability to navigate the complexities of both Egyptian and Roman politics. Both leaders had their own ambitions, and each saw the other as a means of strengthening their position. Cleopatra, ever the pragmatic queen, supported Antony in his military campaigns, providing financial resources, troops, and vital political backing. One of Antony's key military goals during this period was to expand Rome's influence in the East, particularly through a campaign against the Parthian Empire. Cleopatra, recognizing the importance of this campaign to Antony's ambitions, threw her full support behind it. She supplied him with much-needed resources and even accompanied him during his campaign in the East. For Cleopatra, the alliance with Antony was a way to protect Egypt from the growing power of Rome, while for Antony, it was a chance to consolidate his power and expand his influence in the East. The two rulers shared a common goal: to challenge Octavian's rise to power. She was known for her intelligence, her political savvy, and her ability to win the loyalty of her subjects. Antony saw in her a strong ally who could help him challenge Octavian's growing influence, but his authority was increasingly challenged by Octavian, who would later become Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. The political landscape was fractured, and both men sought to consolidate their power by securing important alliances. Their alliance was rooted in mutual political advantage, but it also developed into a romantic and emotional bond that would eventually shape the course of history. Cleopatra and Mark Antony's paths crossed for the first time in 41 BC. Following the assassination of Julius Caesar in 44 BCE for Cleopatra, the political vacuum left by Caesar's death offered a new opportunity. She had already aligned herself with Caesar, and after his assassination, she found herself at a crossroads. Caesar's assassination not only removed her direct Roman ally, but also created a power struggle that could have easily led to Egypt's annexation by Rome. Cleopatra needed a new partner, someone who could protect her kingdom and strengthen her position. Mark Antony, at that time, was one of the most powerful men in Rome, and Cleopatra, recognizing the potential for political gain, sought to meet him. Antony, for his part, had heard much about Cleopatra even before they met. Their meeting in 41 BCE was a significant moment in history, marking the beginning of an alliance that would have far-reaching consequences. The alliance between Cleopatra and Antony was as much about politics as it was about romance. Cleopatra and Antony's relationship grew stronger as they worked together to achieve their political aims. In addition to military support, Cleopatra also played a key role in strengthening Antony's position in Rome. Antony's decision to form a political and romantic bond with Cleopatra would have been seen as controversial in Rome. The birth of Antony and Cleopatra's children further cemented their political and personal bond. The birth of Alexander Halias, named after the sun god, and Cleopatra Selene, named after her mother, were seen as symbols of the union between Egypt and Rome. For Cleopatra, her children with Antony were more than just heirs. They were political tools that could be used to strengthen her position. However, the birth of these children also contributed to the political tension between Antony and Octavian. The political consequences of Cleopatra and Antony's alliance were profound. Octavian capitalized on Antony's growing association with Cleopatra to portray him as a man who had abandoned his Roman duties in favor of Eastern luxury and decadence. The growing tension between Antony and Octavian ultimately led to the final confrontation between the two men at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE. While politically motivated, was deeply intertwined with personal affection and shared ambition. The consequences of their alliance were reshaping the political landscape of the Mediterranean and contributing to the rise of Octavian as the first emperor of Rome. The final years of Cleopatra's reign are marked by the tragic decline of both her personal fortunes and the Kingdom of Egypt. Despite her strength, strategic alliances and intelligence, the fate of Cleopatra and her beloved Mark Antony would ultimately be sealed by a single. The battle was not just a military struggle, but a political and personal one, fueled by the ambitions of Octavian to consolidate power and eliminate his rivals. Their personal relationship, which had once been a source of strength, had become a liability in the eyes of Roman society, which viewed Cleopatra as a foreign manipulator and Antony as a Roman leader who had lost his way. Octavian, using his political acumen, capitalized on these perceptions, framing the conflict as a battle for the future of Rome itself. Antony, seeing Cleopatra's ships retreat, followed her, abandoning the battlefield and his own forces. The defeat was not just a loss on the battlefield, it was a total collapse of the political and military forces that had once seemed so strong. His dreams of ruling the eastern Mediterranean alongside Cleopatra were over, and his loyalty to her only deepened as their mutual prospects diminished. As Octavian's forces closed in on Egypt, Antony, despairing, received false news that Cleopatra had died. Her death was not just the tragic end of a ruler, it symbolized the end of an era for Egypt. Cleopatra's tragic end was the final blow to Egypt's independence. Octavian swiftly moved to annex Egypt as a province of the Roman Empire, bringing an end to the Ptolemaic dynasty. To some, she remains an embodiment of political shrewdness, intelligence, and an enduring symbol of Egypt's ancient power. Despite her intelligence, political astuteness, and charisma, Cleopatra could not escape the tide of Roman expansion that had swept across the Mediterranean world. The fall of Egypt, like the fall of so many great empires before and after, was inevitable. Yet, Cleopatra's story remains an indelible part of Egypt's legacy, a testament to her determination, political acumen, and the unrelenting pursuit of power in a world defined by shifting allegiances and competing empires. To others, she is a tragic figure, a woman whose personal and political ambitions were ultimately undone by her alliances with powerful Roman men. This final chapter in Egypt's long history symbolizes not only the end of a dynasty but the beginning of a new era, one in which Rome would dominate the Mediterranean for centuries to come. Cleopatra's legacy, both as a ruler and a woman, would continue to captivate the imagination of generations to come, but the power she fought so hard to maintain would be lost forever, swallowed by the vast expanse of the Roman Empire. Regardless of the interpretation, Cleopatra's death marked the end of the Ptolemaic rule, the final end of Egypt's political independence, and the ultimate triumph of Roman imperialism. This marked the end of Egypt's status as an independent kingdom that had once been a dominant power in the Mediterranean world. Cleopatra's passing marked the final chapter in the history of the Ptolemaic dynasty, which had ruled Egypt for nearly 3 centuries, and it sealed Egypt's fate as a Roman province. The ancient civilization, with its rich culture, history, and traditions, was now subsumed into the growing Roman Empire. Egypt would remain under Roman control for centuries, its kings replaced by Roman governors. The iconic pyramids and temples that had once stood as symbols of Egypt's grandeur now became monuments of a bygone era, reminders of a civilization that had fallen to the might of Rome. Overcome with grief, he attempted to take his own life by falling on his sword. Mortally wounded, he was carried to Cleopatra, who, hearing of his fate, rushed to his side. He died in her arms, marking a tragic end to their partnership. Cleopatra and Antony retreated back to Egypt, knowing that their power had been shattered. Determined to avoid the humiliation of being taken prisoner by Octavian, she decided to take her own life rather than face the disgrace of being paraded through Rome as a captive. Cleopatra's death was an act of both personal will and political defiance. In the face of inevitable defeat, she chose to control her own fate. The prospect of being captured by Octavian, paraded through the streets of Rome in a triumph, and forced to submit to Roman rule was a fate neither could bear. The decision was disastrous. Their forces were routed, and Octavian's fleet emerged victorious. The consequences were immediate and catastrophic for both Cleopatra and Antony. The battle marked the beginning of the end for their political aspirations, as their defeat spelled the collapse of their power and influence in the Mediterranean, and by the desperate attempt of Antony and Cleopatra to maintain their alliance and retain control over Egypt. Catastrophic battle, one that would not only end their lives but also mark the fall of Egypt as an independent power. The Battle of Actium, a defining moment in Roman history, was the stage upon which their ultimate demise would play out, leading to Cleopatra's suicide, Antony's tragic end, and the annexation of Egypt into the Roman Empire. The confrontation took place off the western coast of Greece, in the Ionian Sea, near the promontory of Actium. The battle was largely naval, and Cleopatra's fleet played a crucial role. Cleopatra, ever the strategist, had commanded a sizable fleet to support Antony's forces. However, her fleet, despite its size, faced serious challenges during the battle. Some of Antony's troops, feeling the pressure of Octavian's more disciplined forces, began to waver in their resolve. Cleopatra, realizing the dire situation, made the fateful decision to withdraw her ships from the battle. The Battle of Actium, fought in 31 BC, was a climactic confrontation between the forces of Octavian, Julius Caesar's adopted heir, and the combined forces of Mark Antony and Cleopatra. By the time of the battle, Cleopatra and Antony had already faced a growing campaign of propaganda and political pressure from Octavian, who skillfully painted them as traitors to Rome. Antony and Cleopatra's forces were formidable, but the Battle of Actium would be a decisive moment. This withdrawal was a pivotal moment that sealed their fate. The aftermath of the Battle of Actium was filled with humiliation and despair. For Antony, the defeat was personal as well as political. Cleopatra, however, did not give up hope immediately. The exact details of Cleopatra's suicide are still shrouded in mystery, but it is generally believed that she took her life using a venomous snake, possibly an ASP, though some sources suggest she may have used poison. With Cleopatra's death, Egypt fell under the control of Octavian, who had long sought to bring the kingdom under Roman rule. For Egypt, the loss of sovereignty was a profound moment. For Cleopatra, her legacy has been both romanticized and vilified in history. Cleopatra's tragic demise is a stark reminder of the delicate balance between power and fate. With Cleopatra's death, the Ptolemaic dynasty ceased to exist, and Egypt, once a shining jewel of the ancient world, became a province of Rome. Cleopatra's reign may have ended with tragedy, but her legacy has endured for millennia. Her story transcends the annals of history, and she remains one of the most captivating figures in both Egyptian and Roman history. Her reign, though marked by internal strife and external threats, is often seen as a final act of resistance against the dominance of Rome. Cleopatra was one of the last rulers to maintain the ideals of pharaonic rule, and in her, the Egyptians saw a continuation of their ancient traditions. While her efforts to preserve Egypt's sovereignty ultimately failed, her death marked the end of an era for Egypt as an independent power. Her image has undergone numerous transformations, from the political pawn of Roman propaganda to the subject of romanticized portrayals. In the ancient Roman world, Cleopatra was often vilified as a seductress and manipulator, someone who used her beauty and charm to control powerful Roman men. She is no longer just the object of Roman disdain or a figure of romantic fantasy, but a woman who commanded a kingdom, navigated the complexities of power, and defied expectations. In the modern world, where female political leaders are still often judged by different standards than their male counterparts, in the traditional accounts, her relationships with Caesar and Antony were often portrayed as indicative of a woman who used her body to manipulate and control men. However, modern interpretations view these relationships as politically astute alliances, showcasing Cleopatra's ability to use both her intellect and her personal charisma to form crucial alliances. In doing so, she shows that women in power are often not just in positions of authority, but are also subject to public scrutiny and complex expectations. Cleopatra's ability to wield power in a male-dominated world is a source of inspiration. She used her intelligence and political insight to secure Egypt's place in the Mediterranean world, showing that women could exercise control over empires and engage with the world on equal footing with men. Film portrayals of Cleopatra, most famously Elizabeth Taylor's portrayal in the 1963 epic, emphasize her as both a political leader and a woman of incredible charisma, shifting away from the traditional narratives of her as a manipulative seductress. The myth of Cleopatra as both a queen and a lover has continued to captivate audiences for centuries, ensuring that her legacy persists in popular culture. As the last queen of Egypt, she tried to navigate the shifting powers of the Mediterranean world with intelligence, charm, and political savvy, leaving an indelible mark on history. While her reign ended in tragedy and the fall of Egypt, her influence continues to resonate today as a symbol of feminine power, political resilience, and intellectual prowess. Cleopatra remains one of the most fascinating and complex figures in history, and her story will undoubtedly continue to inspire generations to come. Her story continues to inspire discussions about the intersection of power, gender, and influence, making her a timeless figure whose impact stretches far beyond the ancient world. This narrative, crafted largely by Octavian and his supporters, painted her as a dangerous foreign woman whose ambition posed a threat to Roman stability. Roman poets, writers, and historians, such as Horace and Plutarch, often emphasized her supposed role in weakening Rome by influencing two of its greatest leaders, Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. Cleopatra's reign may have been the last of the Ptolemaic dynasty, but she remains one of the most iconic figures in Egyptian history. In literature, theater, and art, she became the symbol of an exotic and alluring queen whose political acumen and personal magnetism could bend men to her will. In Shakespeare's play Antony and Cleopatra, for example, Cleopatra is portrayed as a woman of intelligence and depth, a queen capable of both immense passion and cold calculation. Her tragic end only added to her mystique, making her one of history's most enduring female figures. Her complex relationship with Rome, one of both dependency and resistance, reflects the tension between Egypt's ancient traditions and the overwhelming power of Rome. Despite Egypt's incorporation into the Roman Empire, Cleopatra's reign is still viewed as an attempt to defy imperial domination, making her an enduring symbol of resistance. In a world where women in positions of power are still often marginalized or misunderstood, Cleopatra's legacy serves as a reminder of the complexities of female leadership. Her ability to rule in a patriarchal world, to command respect and loyalty from powerful men, and to navigate the shifting political realities of her time, places her among the most remarkable female rulers in history. Her efforts to preserve Egypt's culture, religion, and sovereignty are remembered as a final, valiant attempt to maintain Egypt's independence at a time when its fate was increasingly in the hands of Rome. Though Egypt ultimately fell to Rome, Cleopatra's impact on the world she left behind was profound. In both the context of her time and through the lens of history, her political acumen, cultural significance, and personal story have resonated with generations. In the context of Egyptian history, Cleopatra is remembered as the last pharaoh, a figure who held the mantle of Egypt's ancient traditions and attempted to restore its power in a rapidly changing world. Politically, Cleopatra's legacy is intertwined with her ability to navigate the complexities of Roman politics. Through her alliances with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, she secured not only her throne but also a powerful connection to the Roman world. Despite her tragic end, Cleopatra remains a symbol of political savvy, of a ruler who used diplomacy, intelligence, and charm to further her kingdom's interests. Her influence was undeniable, and her role in shaping the political landscape of the Mediterranean world at the time cannot be overstated. Her legacy as a ruler who strived to protect Egypt's independence, even at the cost of her own life, remains a powerful example of political resilience. However, Cleopatra's political legacy is also inextricably linked to the Roman conquest of Egypt. Over the centuries, Cleopatra has been mythologized in both the Roman world and later in art, literature, and media. Yet, over time, this image of Cleopatra as a mere seductress was gradually replaced by one of a powerful and intelligent ruler. In modern times, Cleopatra's image has evolved even further, often viewed through the lens of modern feminism and the desire for strong female role models. Cleopatra's influence extends far beyond her historical period and continues to inspire modern discussions about power, gender, and leadership. Cleopatra's leadership challenges traditional notions of power, demonstrating that intellect, diplomacy, and personal charisma can be as potent as military strength. Cleopatra's legacy also prompts a reconsideration of the roles that gender and sexuality play in the exercise of power. Her legacy in modern culture can be seen in literature, art, and film, where Cleopatra is often portrayed as a symbol of female strength, intellect, and seduction. In conclusion, Cleopatra's legacy is multifaceted and enduring. Death, in ancient Egypt, was not seen as the end of life, but as a transition, a gateway to a new existence in the afterlife. This belief permeated every aspect of Egyptian life, from their daily routines to the grand architectural feats they created to honor the dead. Their belief in the afterlife was so integral to their worldview that it shaped almost every aspect of their existence. The Egyptians viewed the afterlife as a continuation of earthly life, one that could be even more prosperous if proper rituals were observed. Unlike many cultures that viewed death as a finality, the Egyptians believed in an eternal soul that would journey through the afterlife. The body, which the Egyptians believed would be the soul's eternal home, had to be safeguarded from decay and destruction. The focus on the afterlife ensured that Egyptians took great care in their burial practices, and the preservation of the body became a sacred duty. Tombs were filled with not only the body but also objects, offerings, and texts designed to support the deceased in their journey. Their burial practices reflected their dual role as rulers of both the physical and spiritual realms. The tombs built for pharaohs, especially the Great Pyramids, were designed to be eternal resting places that would allow them to rule forever in the afterlife. The opening of the mouth ceremony, for example, was a ritual designed to reanimate the body and ensure the deceased could speak, eat, and breathe in the afterlife. Death was not seen as an end, but a continuation of life, and the preparations for the afterlife were just as important as the life that preceded them. The belief in immortality shaped the way the Egyptians viewed both life and death, guiding them to create complex and elaborate rituals that ensured the CA could continue its journey into eternity. These rituals were not only religious but also political acts, reinforcing the authority of the rulers and ensuring the continuity of Egypt's social order. The tombs and burial sites of Egypt stand as lasting monuments to this belief system, providing modern archaeologists and historians with a glimpse into the minds of a people who viewed the afterlife as an integral part of their world, just as important as the life they lived on Earth. Through these practices, Egypt's legacy of spiritual resilience and political continuity continues to captivate the world. This ritual connected the deceased with the divine, reaffirming their authority and status as an eternal ruler, continuing to oversee Egypt even after death. The scale and complexity of these tombs, constructed with immense labor and resources, demonstrated the central role of the pharaoh in maintaining Egypt's cosmic order. The ruler's death was seen as a necessary passage to maintain the balance of the world, and their continued presence in the afterlife was essential for the prosperity and stability of Egypt. The Book of the Dead, a collection of spells and prayers, became a guidebook for the soul, helping it find its way through the afterlife. Tombs for nobles and officials were often elaborately decorated with scenes of their lives, and these individuals were buried with an array of goods to help them in the afterlife. The tomb was seen as the individual's final resting place, and the offerings and items buried with them reflected their status in life. This distinction between the burial practices of the elite and common people further emphasized the idea that social order was maintained not only through life but also through death. This belief system turned death into a process of preparation rather than an inevitable ending. This belief in immortality extended to all levels of society, although the grandeur of the burial rituals varied between social classes. The way a ruler or noblest body was treated in death symbolized the continuity of the state and the ruler's divine authority. Burial sites were more than resting places. They were power statements, meant to ensure the ruler's authority continued even after death. The grand pyramids, massive tombs, and temple complexes built to honor pharaohs were as much about preserving political power as they were about ensuring the pharaoh's spiritual journey. Pharaohs and the elite were mummified with elaborate rituals, surrounded by treasures, amulets, and protective symbols, while commoners were often buried in simpler ways. Yet, for all Egyptians, ensuring the CAA's protection was paramount, and the rituals performed in preparation for death were meant to guarantee that the soul could safely navigate the dangers of the afterlife and enjoy eternal life. The CA, an essential component of the soul, was thought to live on after the body died, and it needed to be preserved in order to continue its existence. The Egyptians viewed life as a temporary phase in a never-ending cycle, and the preservation of the K was necessary for the soul to thrive in the afterlife. This belief was reflected not only in religious ceremonies but also in their social structures, architecture, and daily practices. The living, in their view, were bound to honor the dead through elaborate burial rituals, which ensured that the deceased would enjoy an eternal, prosperous life beyond this world. The Egyptians' obsession with the afterlife and their rituals surrounding death were not merely spiritual practices, but deeply intertwined with their cultural, political, and economic systems. And Anubis, the god of mummification, governing the realm beyond death. The belief in immortality influenced much of Egyptian art, literature, and religious practices. Temples, tombs, and even cities were constructed with the afterlife in mind. Monuments were built to honor the gods and the dead, and the architecture of Egypt's grandest structures, such as the pyramids, was designed to ensure a smooth journey for the deceased into the next world. Even in everyday life, the Egyptians thought of death as something that was always present, something that, when approached correctly, was part of the natural order. Death was not feared. It was embraced as a continuation of existence. Burial practices, therefore, were of paramount importance, and the preparations for the afterlife were treated as a vital aspect of life itself. This segment will explore the central role death and the afterlife played in Egyptian society, how the Egyptians' belief in immortality shaped their understanding of life and death, and how their burial rituals symbolized not only religious devotion, but also political power and national continuity. For the ancient Egyptians, death was not an event to be feared, but rather a necessary part of the cosmic order. The afterlife was central to Egyptian religion, with key deities such as Osiris, the god of the dead. Central to Egyptian burial practices was their belief in immortality. The CA was closely linked to the physical body, so preserving the body through mummification was vital to maintaining the soul's continuity. The belief in immortality was not only spiritual but also had profound social and cultural implications. Egyptian burial rituals were not just religious acts. They were also deeply intertwined with politics and social order. Pharaohs, as both political leaders and divine figures, were considered the intermediaries between the gods and the people. For the elite, burial rituals were similarly significant. Even in death, the ruler's continued authority was expressed through rituals performed by priests and family members. In ancient Egypt, burial practices were deeply embedded in the cultural, spiritual, and political fabric of society. The ancient Egyptians' understanding of the afterlife was not just a matter of spiritual belief, but an intricate and deeply embedded part of their worldview. Their belief in life after death, grounded in a complex theological system, influenced every aspect of Egyptian society, from politics and art to daily life and burial practices. Central to these beliefs was the notion that death was a transitional journey that required careful preparation and guidance. The soul, in Egyptian thought, was composed of several essential components, each with a distinct role in ensuring the continuation of existence after death. These components, Gaba and Akua, integral to the Egyptian conception of immortality, an immortal aspect that entered the afterlife as part of the divine realm. Achieving the status of ACU meant that the deceased had successfully undergone the trials of the afterlife and had been judged worthy of eternal life. The ACU was granted a form of divine existence, able to live on forever in the company of the gods. This section will explore the spiritual underpinnings of Egyptian burial practices by examining the concept of the soul. The journey to the afterlife, the Ka and Ba could remain in the tomb or other sacred spaces, while the Aku would ascend to the divine, completing the cycle of immortality. At the end of the journey, the soul would meet Osiris, the god of the afterlife, and be granted eternal life. The primary gods involved in death and the afterlife were Osiris, Anubis, and Thoth, each contributing to the protection, judgment, and ultimate resurrection of the soul. This final reunion with Osiris was seen as the ultimate goal, the AQ state, where the soul would join the gods and be reborn into a new, divine existence. He played a crucial role in the mummification process, overseeing the embalming of the body and ensuring that the deceased's ka was preserved. He kept the divine records of the deceased's fate, ensuring that the judgment was fair and just. Mu'at, symbolizing truth, justice, and cosmic order, was central to the moral code of ancient Egypt. The feather of Mahat represented the ideals of truth and justice, and the deceased's heart was weighed to determine whether they had lived according to these principles. This process reflected the deep connection between religion, governance, and personal conduct in ancient Egypt, showing how their spiritual beliefs shaped not only the afterlife, but every aspect of their daily lives. Their beliefs about the Kaaba and Aku emphasized the importance of preservation, judgment, and renewal, with the gods playing essential roles in each stage of the soul's journey. The afterlife was not simply an abstract concept, it was a process of transition, purification, and rebirth. The weighing of the heart and the concept of Mot reinforced the moral code that governed Egyptian life, ensuring that truth and justice would guide the deceased toward eternal life. Through their understanding of death and the afterlife, the Egyptians created a system that connected every aspect of life with the divine, a testament to their belief in immortality and the eternal cycle of the soul. A heart that was pure and free of sin would pass the test and be allowed to enter the afterlife. Thoth's role was to preserve the order of the afterlife, acting as a mediator between the gods and the deceased. Kings and commoners alike were expected to live according to the principles of Ma'at. This belief in cosmic balance influenced Egyptian politics, social relations, and personal conduct. The judgment in the afterlife, therefore, was not just about individual actions, but about the integrity of the order that sustained the world. Anubis also guided the deceased soul through the duat, protecting them from dangers and ensuring their safe passage to Osiris. Osiris was often depicted as a mummified king, embodying the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. In myth, Osiris was murdered by his brother Set, only to be resurrected by his wife Isis. His death and resurrection became a powerful symbol for the afterlife, as it represented the cycle of regeneration and eternal life. Osiris was the final judge, determining whether the soul was worthy of entering the afterlife, and the roles played by gods in ensuring a successful passage to eternity. According to Egyptian beliefs, after death, the soul embarked on a journey through the underworld, known as the duat. If the heart was heavier, weighed down by sin or wrongdoings, the soul would be devoured by the monster Am, a fearsome creature with the head of a crocodile, the torso of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus. This was considered the ultimate fate for the unworthy soul, complete and eternal obliteration. The path was often depicted in tomb paintings, inscribed texts, and the Book of the Dead, a guidebook filled with spells and prayers designed to aid the deceased. One of the most important events in this journey was the weighing of the heart, where the heart of the deceased was placed on a scale and weighed against the feather of Moat, the goddess of truth, order, and justice. The heart, believed to contain the soul's moral weight, would be evaluated to determine whether the deceased had lived a righteous life. This journey was fraught with obstacles, dangers, and judgment, but it was also one filled with opportunities for rebirth and transformation. The Egyptian understanding of the soul was multifaceted and central to their conception of life and death. Unlike many cultures that viewed the soul as a singular entity, the Egyptians believed the soul was divided into several parts, each serving a different function. It was not tied to the physical body, but was intrinsically connected to the person's identity. The Kie was believed to continue living after death, existing in the tomb or burial site, where it would require sustenance, typically in the form of offerings left at the tomb. Without the Ka, the individual would not survive in the afterlife, making its preservation a primary concern in Egyptian burial practices. The three primary components of the soul, the Ka, the Ba, and the Aka, were all essential to the individual's spiritual survival after death. The Ka was considered the vital essence of an individual, the life force that sustained them during their lifetime. The Ba was the spirit or personality of an individual, often depicted as a human-headed bird. The Ba was considered to be the part of the soul that could leave the tomb and travel freely between the earthly and spiritual realms. Upon death, the Ba was believed to reunite with the Ca to maintain the continuity of the individual's existence. However, for the Ba to return to the body or tomb, It required a preserved physical form, which is why mummification was so crucial for the soul's well-being. The ACU was the final, transformed state of the soul. Considered the blessed, these three components of the soul interacted and worked together to ensure that the deceased would successfully navigate the challenges of the afterlife, be reborn, and enjoy an eternal existence with the gods. The journey to the afterlife was a perilous and complex one, requiring both physical preservation and spiritual guidance. The deceased would begin their journey in the Duat, where they would encounter a series of challenges, including dangerous creatures and hostile gods. If the heart was lighter than the feather of Mahat, the soul was deemed worthy and could pass into the afterlife, joining Osiris and the gods in eternal life. Beyond the weighing of the heart, the soul's journey continued, and the deceased would encounter various gods and divine beings, each responsible for ensuring that the soul could continue its journey safely. Several gods played key roles in the Egyptian afterlife, each responsible for different aspects of the soul's journey. Osiris, as the god of the afterlife, Osiris was central to the Egyptian belief in resurrection and eternal life. Anubis, the jackal-headed god, was the god of mummification and the protector of tombs. Thoth, the ibis, was responsible for recording the judgment of the soul during the weighing of the heart. The weighing of the heart ritual, where the deceased's heart was weighed against the feather of Mahat, was one of the most important aspects of Egyptian death beliefs. The concept of Mayot went beyond individual morality. It was a reflection of the entire social and cosmic order that governed Egyptian life. Thus, the weighing of the heart was not only a moral judgment but a cosmic one deciding whether the deceased could continue to exist in the balanced, eternal order of the gods, or whether they would be erased from existence. The ancient Egyptians' complex and deeply spiritual view of the afterlife reveals much about their worldview. Mummification in ancient Egypt was one of the most important rituals in Egyptian burial practices. It was essential for the continuation of the soul's journey into the afterlife, ensuring that the Aku could recognize and reunite with the body. This sacred process, rooted in the Egyptians' belief in immortality, not only preserved the body for eternity, but also provided the deceased with the opportunity to continue living in the afterlife. The detailed mummification process involved various stages, each carried out with precision, reverence, and ritualistic significance. This section will explore the purpose of mummification, provide a step-by-step breakdown of the technical and spiritual practices involved, and examine how mummification differed across social classes. It was usually carried out by a team of specialized priests and embalmers, who were trained in the intricate details of mummification. The process typically took about 70 days to complete. This cleansing ritual served both a physical and spiritual function, as it prepared the body for the next steps in the mummification process. The embalmer made an incision along the left side of the body, carefully removing the internal organs. The lungs, liver, stomach, and intestines were taken out and preserved separately. These organs were considered essential for the deceased's spiritual journey, and each would be placed in special canopic jars. The heart, however, was left in place, because it was believed to be the seat of the soul, and its judgment would be necessary for the weighing of the heart in the afterlife. And fertility, who protected the lungs and ensured the soul could breathe in the afterlife. The purpose of mummification, the brain was discarded, and the embalmer focused on preserving the more important organs. The ancient Egyptians believed that the soul required a preserved body in order to continue its existence after death. The ka, the vital essence of a person, was thought to be linked to the body, but in most cases, it was either preserved in the body or carefully placed in a small container near the body. And if the body decayed or was destroyed, the soul could not survive in the afterlife. Thus, mummification was seen as essential for the soul's survival. This helped maintain the body's shape and structure during the drying process. These amulets included symbols of deities like Isis, Horus, and Anubis, whose divine protection ensured the safety of the deceased. The eye of Horus, for example, was often placed near the eyes of the deceased to offer spiritual protection. Each layer was carefully bound, and amulets were placed between the wrappings to protect the body from malevolent forces. The mouth was ritually opened by a priest or embalmer, symbolizing the ability of the deceased to speak, eat, and breathe in the afterlife. And spells from the Book of the Dead, which helped guide the soul safely through the trials of the afterlife. These prayers ensured the soul would be able to face the weighing of the heart and ultimately be judged worthy of eternal life. For the elite and pharaohs, mummification was an elaborate, expensive process that included everything from intricate tombs to fine jewelry. The process could take up to 70 days, and royal tombs were equipped with all the materials necessary for the deceased's continued existence in the afterlife. The tombs of pharaohs, such as the pyramids, contained vast arrays of treasures, food offerings, and servant figurines to accompany the deceased. Through careful rituals and meticulous preservation of the body, Egyptians sought to protect and guide the soul, ensuring that the deceased would live on in the presence of the gods. These practices remain a powerful testament to their reverence for life, death, and the divine continuity of existence. This was essential for the soul's functioning in the next world. While they did not receive the same extensive treatment, basic embalming procedures were often followed to preserve the body and ensure the CA could continue its journey. These bodies were often wrapped in linen and placed in simple graves, but even commoners were provided with necessary provisions, like small amulets, to help them in the afterlife. The amulets represented various deities, offering divine protection during the deceased's journey. The resin also had a spiritual significance, as it symbolized protection and ensured that the body remained intact for the afterlife. This was the key to the mummification process, as natron absorbed moisture from the body, preventing decay and ensuring that the body was fully preserved. Whether for a pharaoh or an ordinary Egyptian, mummification was a fundamental part of the journey to eternity. The body was left to dry for 40 days, a period during which the body would shrink and become dehydrated. Each organ was treated and placed in separate canopic jars, each associated with a specific god who protected the organs. Without it, the deceased would be doomed to an incomplete existence, unable to recognize its earthly form or return to it. The mummification process also played a role in ensuring that the body remained protected and undisturbed by external forces, particularly robbers or environmental factors that could cause further decay. The ancient Egyptians believed that if the body was sufficiently preserved and protected, the soul would always have a safe resting place from which it could travel to the afterlife, interact with the gods, and maintain its divine connection to the living world. This belief in immortality was integral to Egyptian society and shaped the way Egyptians thought about life and death. It was not just an individual concern, but a societal one. Preserving the soul's journey ensured that cosmic order, or Mu'at, would be maintained. Detailed step-by-step process. The mummification process involves several complex stages, each with spiritual and cultural significance. 1. Preparation of the body, washing and purification. The first step in mummification involved purifying the body. The body was washed in palm wine and water, then anointed with oils and resin. Removal of internal organs. The next crucial step was the removal of the internal organs. Brain removal. The brain, seen by the Egyptians as a useless organ for the afterlife, was removed through the nostrils with a hooked instrument. Dehydration with natron. The body was then packed with natron, a naturally occurring mixture of sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate. 2. Preservation of internal organs. The next critical step involved the preservation of the internal organs, which were thought to be necessary for the deceased to function in the afterlife. The lungs were placed in a canopic jar with the head of Hapi, the god of the Nile. The stomach. The stomach was placed in a jar with the head of Duamitef, a protector of the deceased who guarded the stomach and ensured the ability to consume food in the afterlife. The liver was placed in a jar with the head of Kabisanuf, a god associated with protecting the liver, as it was believed to be necessary for digestion in the afterlife. The intestines were placed in a jar with the head of the human-headed god who protected the intestines and kept them from harm. The heart, considered the seat of the soul and the center of moral judgment, was sometimes removed. 3. Drying and wrapping. Once the body was dehydrated and the internal organs preserved, the next stage of mummification involved wrapping the body in linen bandages. This step was carefully carried out by the embalmers. Coating the body with resin. The body was covered in resin to seal the skin and protect it. Wrapping in linen. The body was then wrapped in multiple layers of linen sometimes up to 20 layers, depending on the wealth of the deceased. Protective amulets. Key to the preservation of the soul was the inclusion of protective amulets, which were placed inside the wrappings and around the body. 4. Final rituals. The final stage of mummification involved the performance of rituals and prayers to ensure the soul's safe passage to the afterlife. The opening of the mouth ritual. One of the most important final rituals was the opening of the mouth ceremony, which was performed to reanimate the deceased's senses. Other ceremonial prayers. During the entire mummification process, priests recited prayers 5. Mummification for all social classes. Mummification practices differed between social classes, but the core belief in the preservation of the soul remained the same. For commoners, mummification was less elaborate, though still symbolically important. In all cases, the underlying purpose was the same: ensuring the soul's survival in the afterlife. The mummification process reflects the ancient Egyptians' deep belief in immortality, their spiritual sophistication, and the cultural importance they placed on death and the afterlife. The tombs of the ancient Egyptians are some of the most awe-inspiring and enduring symbols of their civilization. These structures were not only places to house the deceased, but they also embodied the Egyptians' complex beliefs in the afterlife, immortality, and the divine nature of the pharaohs. The tombs, especially those built for the pharaohs and high-ranking officials, were designed to serve both as monumental markers of divine authority and as gateways to eternal life. While the pyramids stand as the most iconic representations of Egyptian burial practices, the tombs of the nobility, though less grand, were equally significant, offering insight into the religious, cultural, and political life of ancient Egypt. Recent studies suggest that the labor force was likely composed of seasonal workers, many of whom were not slaves. The pyramid was intended to serve as a divine stairway, guiding the pharaoh's soul to the afterlife, and allowing him to join the gods in eternity. The pyramid was aligned with celestial bodies, reflecting the pharaoh's role in the cosmos and his connection to the sun god, Ra. It was not just a tomb but a symbol of the pharaoh's divine authority and his role in maintaining the balance of the universe, but rather farmers and laborers who worked during the inundation of the Nile when their agricultural duties were on hold. The materials for the pyramid were quarried from the surrounding region: limestone for the bulk of the structure, and granite for the internal chambers. It was designed to resemble the rays of the sun, reflecting the ancient Egyptian belief that the sun was a symbol of life, creation, and the divine. Scenes of agriculture, hunting, feasts, and religious rituals adorned the tombs, reflecting both the individual's accomplishments in life and the rituals necessary for a successful afterlife. They were usually built with a small chamber to house the body and a larger antechamber for offerings. These tombs were designed to offer a place where the deceased could be honored by their families and community, and to provide a spiritual home for the CAA and BA of the deceased. These scenes, rich with symbolism, were meant to help the deceased navigate the afterlife and ensure that they could enjoy the same comforts and pleasures in death that they had enjoyed in life. These paintings and carvings provided spiritual support for the deceased, guiding them through the trials of the afterlife. Scenes from daily life, such as the harvest, hunting expeditions, or feasts, were meant to show the deceased's accomplishments in life. Religious imagery, including depictions of gods and goddesses, was also common, ensuring divine protection for the deceased's journey. Inside royal and elite tombs, various goods were placed to sustain the deceased in their journey. The tomb architect played a significant role in ensuring the tomb was designed according to strict religious principles, aligned with celestial and divine symbolism. Priests were responsible for conducting the burial rituals and ensuring the proper offerings were made to the deceased. They recited prayers, spells, and invocations to the gods, all in an effort to guide the CAA and BA of the deceased safely through the underworld and into the afterlife. These funerary goods ranged from food and drink to weapons, jewelry, and even miniature servant meant to accompany the deceased on their journey and serve their needs in the afterlife. These rituals, which continued long after the burial, helped sustain the deceased's soul and ensure that it would not be forgotten. Tomb robbing was a constant threat, and priests took measures to protect the tomb's sanctity, even employing magical rituals and charms to guard the tomb from thieves. The use of the pyramid as a symbol of the sun Esra'as highlighted the importance of the pharaoh Esro as a living god who would continue to shine in the afterlife. While the pyramids served as grand, celestial stairways to the afterlife for the pharaohs, the tombs of the nobility, though less imposing, were no less important. They were carefully constructed, adorned with paintings and inscriptions, and filled with funerary goods to ensure the deceased's journey to the afterlife. These tombs were not only places for the dead, but also symbols of the continuity of Egypt's religious and political order. They represented the unbroken connection between the living and the divine, and were central to the Egyptians' complex view of death, the afterlife, and the cosmos. Through these tombs, the Egyptians demonstrated their unwavering belief that life was eternal, even beyond death, in the presence of the gods. For the pharaoh, this might include grand chests filled with treasures, clothing, weapons, and armor, all meant to signify their divine power. Jewelry, often made of gold and precious stones, was placed with the deceased to grant them protection and beauty in the afterlife. The inclusion of food and drink, particularly wine and bread, was intended to provide nourishment, as the deceased was believed to need sustenance for the journey ahead. Just as the sun continued its journey across the sky each day, the pyramids served as a representation of the sun god Ra's journey across the sky, with the pharaoh's soul traveling up the pyramid, akin to the sun's rays, and ascending to join the gods in the afterlife. This connection between the pyramid and the sun god emphasized the pharaoh's divine nature. The tombs of officials, priests, and other high-ranking individuals were often cut into rock or built into the cliffs of the Nile, and they were typically smaller in scale than the pyramids, but still rich in symbolic meaning. These tombs were designed to reflect the deceased's social status and ensure their continued existence in the afterlife, albeit on a more modest scale than the pharaoh's tomb. The pyramid was more than just a tomb. It was a monumental symbol of the ruler's cosmic role in ensuring the continuity of life and order. Workers would use simple but effective tools to cut and transport these massive stones, with ramps and levers likely used to lift the heavy blocks into place. The pyramid tombs, the pyramids of ancient Egypt, are perhaps the most recognizable symbols of Egyptian civilization. These monumental tombs, especially the pyramids of Giza, were constructed to house the remains of pharaohs and to serve as their eternal resting places. The largest and most famous of these structures is the Great Pyramid of Giza, built for the pharaoh Khufu. Standing at nearly 480 feet tall, the Great Pyramid was the tallest man-made structure in the world for over 3,800 years. The sheer scale and complexity of the pyramids reflect the immense power of the pharaohs and the belief that there were divine beings whose legacy was to be immortalized for eternity. The construction of these pyramids was an enormous undertaking. Thousands of workers, including skilled laborers, architects, and craftsmen, were employed in the building process. Constructing the pyramids was not only a feat of engineering, but also a deeply religious act. Symbolism of the pyramid's shape was rich with symbolic meaning. The entrance of the pyramid, often located on the northern face, faced the stars, further emphasizing the pharaoh's connection to the heavens. Tombs of the nobility. While the tombs of the pharaohs were grand and imposing, the tombs of the nobility, though less monumental, were still incredibly significant. The tombs of the nobility, particularly those from the New Kingdom period, often featured intricately painted walls, offering a glimpse into the daily lives of the elite. In contrast to the grandeur of the pharaoh's tombs, these smaller tombs often featured a simple but elegant structure. Inside the tombs, the contents of Egyptian tombs were crucial to ensuring the deceased's safe passage into the afterlife. Funerary goods. The wealthiest tombs were filled with items that symbolized the deceased's status, and, more importantly, ensured that they would have everything they needed in the afterlife. Wall paintings and carvings. The walls of tombs, particularly those of high-ranking officials and nobles, were covered with painted scenes depicting the deceased's life, religious practices, and hopes for the afterlife. The role of the tomb architect in the priesthood. The construction and sanctity of tombs were deeply tied to Egypt's religious institutions. The priesthood, especially the high priests of Osiris, also held responsibility for maintaining the tomb and overseeing the ongoing rituals performed for the deceased. The tombs of the pharaohs and the nobility of ancient Egypt stand as monumental testaments to their beliefs in immortality and divine power. The Book of the Dead, also known as the Egyptian Book of the Coming Forth by Day, is one of the most significant and enduring texts from ancient Egypt. It served as a spiritual guidebook for the deceased, offering spells, prayers, and instructions designed to help them navigate the dangers of the underworld and ensure a successful journey to the afterlife. This sacred text, though varied in its versions and content depending on the individual's wealth and status, was foundational to Egyptian burial practices and death rituals. The Book of the Dead provided not only practical guidance but also spiritual protection, reflecting the Egyptians' deep belief in immortality and their profound understanding of the afterlife. Introduction to the Book of the Dead. The Book of the Dead was not a single, unified text, but a collection of spells, prayers. These included providing protection for the soul from the various dangers of the underworld, ensuring that the deceased had access to sustenance. The underworld was filled with dangerous beings, such as serpents, demons, and other malevolent forces that could destroy or consume the soul. Just as the living required food and drink to survive, the dead needed spiritual sustenance to thrive in the afterlife. The Book of the Dead included spells to ensure that the deceased had access to food, water, and other necessary provisions for their eternal existence. For example, the spell for obtaining provision in the afterlife allowed the soul to access the food offerings that were placed in the tomb, ensuring that the K and BA would have nourishment for eternity. A judgment ritual where the deceased heart was weighed against the feather of Mohat, the goddess of truth and justice. The Egyptians believed that the heart was the most important part of the body to be preserved, as it would be the focal point of the CAS judgment. In this judgment, the deceased heart was placed on a scale opposite the feather of Mo. If the heart was lighter than the feather, it was deemed to be free from sin, and the deceased would be granted eternal life in the presence of the gods. If the heart was heavier, weighed down by sin, it would be devoured by the monster Amit, a fearsome creature with the head of a crocodile, the body of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus. This was the ultimate punishment for those whose hearts were unworthy, leading to a permanent spiritual obliteration. For example, the Eye of Horus was believed to offer protection and restore balance, while the Ankh symbolized eternal life, and ensuring that they could ultimately achieve the peace and eternity they sought. Through its spells, prayers, and instructions, it offered the deceased a chance at immortality and eternal peace. The weighing of the heart ritual, the protective amulets, and the divine guidance offered by the gods all reflected the Egyptians' deep concern with moral and spiritual integrity. Through these practices, they ensured that the deceased could face the challenges of the afterlife, overcome evil, and join the gods in a blissful, eternal existence. The Book of the Dead continues to be one of the most important sources of understanding ancient Egyptian beliefs, shedding light on their understanding of death, the afterlife, and the moral order of the cosmos. Amulets such as these were placed throughout the tomb, often inscribed with magical spells to ensure that the deceased would be shielded from malevolent forces and guided safely through their spiritual trials. This was perhaps the most significant event in the afterlife journey, and was essential to the moral evaluation of the deceased's life. Specific spells, such as the spell for protecting the soul from the serpent, were written to shield the deceased from these threats. These spells often invoked the gods, requesting divine protection from evil and guidance through the perilous underworld. It reflected the Egyptian moral code, where individuals were expected to live according to the principles of truth, justice, and balance. Those who lived a life in accordance with these principles would be rewarded with eternal life, while those who strayed from Mahat faced a permanent and irreversible fate. These small charms and talismans were often placed in the wrappings of the deceased or within their tombs, providing spiritual protection from both supernatural forces and the physical dangers of the underworld, and facilitating the soul's acceptance by Osiris, the god of the afterlife. The scarab was associated with the sun god Ra, and its role in burial rituals was to ensure the deceased's rebirth in the afterlife. The scarab was often placed over the heart of the deceased or worn as a pendant to aid in their spiritual journey. Its symbolic function was tied to the idea of eternal renewal, much like the cycle of the sun, and instructions designed to protect and guide the deceased as they moved through the underworld. This text was often written on papyrus scrolls and placed in the tombs of the dead, usually near the body of the deceased, to assist them in their journey into the afterlife. The Book of the Dead was designed to help the deceased navigate the challenges of the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. The Book of the Dead contained numerous spells designed to facilitate this process, ensuring that the deceased's soul was able to stand before Osiris and pass judgment. The spell for knowing the heart of the deceased was one such prayer that invoked Osiris to help ensure that the heart of the deceased would be found pure, enabling them to pass into the afterlife, and to ensure that they were able to pass judgment and ultimately join the gods in the afterlife. The text was part of a broader tradition of funerary literature that began in the Old Kingdom but became most fully developed during the New Kingdom. The spells contained in the Book of the Dead were written in Egyptian, hieratic script and included a wide range of instructions and invocations to ensure a safe passage for the soul. These texts were not meant to be read by the deceased alone, but were also intended to be recited by priests during funerary rites, so they played a significant role in the rituals surrounding death. Unlike other texts, the Book of the Dead was highly personalized and varied greatly depending on the needs and status of the deceased. Wealthier individuals could afford more elaborate versions, with additional spells and lavish illustrations. For those who could not afford such a grand version, Simpler copies of the text, often with fewer spells, were used. Despite these differences, the core purpose of the Book of the Dead was the same: to guide the soul, protect it from malevolent forces, and ensure its acceptance into the afterlife. Spells and rituals. The Book of the Dead contains spells and prayers designed to serve several important functions in the journey to the afterlife. Protection from dangers. One of the main purposes of the Book of the Dead was to protect the deceased from the terrifying monsters and guards they would encounter in the duat. Access to food and drink. Another major concern for the deceased in the afterlife was sustenance, facilitating judgment by Osiris. The ultimate goal of the deceased was to be judged by Osiris and found worthy of entering the afterlife. The weighing of the heart. One of the most important rituals in the Book of the Dead is the weighing of the heart. The heart was considered the seat of a person's emotions, thoughts, and actions. The weighing of the heart was not only a physical event, but also a symbolic one. Amulets and protection amulets played an essential role in the Book of the Dead, serving as magical objects that protected the deceased from harm and ensured their successful passage into the afterlife. The scarab, perhaps the most famous amulet used in ancient Egypt. The scarab beetle symbolized regeneration and protection. Other protective amulets. In addition to the scarab, numerous other amulets were used, each representing different aspects of divine protection. Amulets were essential tools for the deceased, providing them with the spiritual armor necessary to navigate the dangers of the afterlife. The Book of the Dead was more than just a funerary text. It was a spiritual guide, a protective talisman, and a key to the afterlife. While the elaborate pyramids and grand tombs of Egypt's pharaohs and elite officials are among the most iconic symbols of the ancient civilization, the burial practices for common Egyptians were significantly simpler, yet still deeply rooted in the same spiritual beliefs about the afterlife. For the common people, the journey to the afterlife was equally important, though their tombs were typically smaller and more modest. Despite the differences in scale, the core beliefs about the soul's journey and the need for protection and sustenance in the afterlife remained consistent across all classes. The simplicity of the tombs did not lessen their significance. Rather, they reflected the ways in which ancient Egyptians of all walks of life sought to ensure their souls' safe passage to the next world. Simple burial sites. Common Egyptians did not have access to the monumental tombs reserved for the pharaohs or high-ranking officials. Just as pharaohs were buried with food, weapons, and precious goods, the commoners' tombs were filled with more modest provisions intended to support the soul in the afterlife. Pottery vessels, especially those used to store food and drink, were also frequently included. These offerings were symbolic of the nourishment the deceased would need to survive in the afterlife. In addition to food, simple figurines, often shabti or ashabti figures, were, while priests performed official rituals for the elite. It was often the responsibility of family members to maintain the deceased's tomb and perform regular rituals to honor their memory. In some cases, family members might place additional food or other items in the tomb, reinforcing their ongoing care and responsibility for the deceased's well-being in the afterlife. These visits were also a way to maintain a spiritual connection with the deceased, as many Egyptians believed that the soul of the deceased could still influence the lives of their living relatives. These rites were integral to ensuring that the Kardan Bar remained connected to the body and could continue to receive nourishment and offerings. The Egyptians believed that the deceased were not completely separated from the living world, but were part of an ongoing cycle of life and death. Community members often participated in public religious festivals or ceremonies that honored the deceased, particularly at key moments such as the annual Feast of the Valley, during which people visited the tombs of their ancestors to offer gifts and prayers. These communal rituals ensured that the spirits of the dead were remembered and kept engaged in the life of the community, thus reinforcing social and familial bonds even beyond death. These small statues, which were typically made of clay, wood, or faience, were believed to serve as servants for the deceased in the afterlife, ensuring that the soul would not have to perform labor or struggle for survival. The tombs of commoners, though simpler in design and content, were equally important in ensuring the soul's safe passage into the afterlife. The offerings placed in the tombs and the involvement of family and community in honoring the deceased reinforced the central belief that death was not an end, but a continuation of life. Through these practices, the common people of ancient Egypt were able to participate in the broader spiritual and cosmic order, maintaining a connection with their ancestors and ensuring their place in the eternal cycle of life and death. Whether in the grandeur of the pyramids, or the simplicity of a pit grave. The tombs of the dead stood as a testament to the enduring belief in immortality and the afterlife that shaped every aspect of Egyptian life. These offerings were crucial for sustaining this. The placement of these items in the tombs also reinforced the belief that the afterlife was a continuation of earthly life, where the deceased would need material sustenance and the company of familiar objects, and ensuring that the soul had access to sustenance, protection, and tools for the journey. Instead, their tombs were often much smaller and less elaborate, but they still followed a clear pattern based on religious beliefs about the afterlife. These tombs, while modest, were carefully constructed to ensure that the deceased could rest in peace and be properly prepared for their journey to the afterlife. Though these tombs were less elaborate than those of the elite, they still followed the same fundamental religious principles, ensuring that the deceased would be able to continue their existence beyond the physical world. One of the most common burial sites for the common people was the pit grave. These graves were simple, dug into the earth, often located in the deserts surrounding Egyptian cities to avoid disturbance. The bodies of the deceased were usually placed in a pit or a shallow grave, sometimes enclosed by small stone markers. Over time, this evolved into more structured rock-cut tombs, where the deceased would be laid to rest in a small chamber carved into a cliff face or underground rock. These rock-cut tombs were still modest compared to the Grand Pyramids, but they were designed to provide the deceased with a permanent resting place that would endure. In addition to pit graves and rock-cut tombs, some commoners were buried in simple rectangular brick tombs, which were often stacked in clusters along the outskirts of villages. Offerings for the afterlife. While common Egyptians did not have the wealth to furnish their tombs with vast treasures like those of pharaohs or nobility, they still believed in the necessity of providing offerings for the deceased's journey. Typical offerings placed in the tombs of common people included food items such as bread, fruits, and beer, staples of the Egyptian diet. Unlike the elaborate statues and jewelry found in the tombs of the elite, the offerings in commoners' graves were modest, yet they served a similar purpose. The deceased with everything needed to live comfortably in the afterlife. Role of family and community for common Egyptians. The role of the family and community in ensuring the deceased's transition to the afterlife was especially important. Family members typically visited the tomb regularly, bringing offerings to the deceased and performing prayers or rituals to ensure the soul's safety and comfort. In addition to family, the broader community played a role in honoring the dead. While the burial practices of common Egyptians were far more modest than those of the pharaohs or elite officials, they still adhered to the same fundamental religious and spiritual principles that defined Egyptian society. Egyptian burial practices, with their elaborate rituals, awe-inspiring tombs, and deeply spiritual significance, continue to captivate the imagination of people worldwide. These practices were rooted in the Egyptians' profound belief in the afterlife and their desire to ensure that the soul would journey successfully into eternity. Thousands of years after the ancient Egyptians laid their dead to rest in majestic tombs, the mystery and grandeur of their burial rituals continue to influence modern culture. Perhaps the most famous of these discoveries was the tomb of Tutankhamun, uncovered by archaeologist Howard Carter in 1922. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb, the texts found in tombs, such as the Book of the Dead, along with wall paintings and inscriptions, have shed light on the spiritual and religious practices of the Egyptians. These findings have sparked an enduring fascination with Egypt, making it one of the most studied and revered civilizations in the world. In popular culture, Egyptian motifs, such as the Sphinx, scarabs, hieroglyphs, and golden funerary masks have become symbols of mystery and immortality. From jewelry to fashion and architecture, the distinct styles associated with ancient Egypt, especially those found in tombs, are frequently used in modern aesthetics. The idea of an eternal soul, the preservation of the body, and the connection between life and death all have their echoes in various spiritual traditions. The concept of divine judgment, as seen in the weighing of the heart ritual, has resonated in both religious contexts and in the broader understanding of moral life and the afterlife, and spiritual identity, influencing not only our understanding of their civilization, but also shaping modern concepts of death and the afterlife. The scale, artistry, and significance of the tombs, particularly those built for the pharaohs and high-ranking officials, have continued to inspire awe and admiration. They were not merely places of burial, but representations of the divine authority of the rulers and their connection to the cosmos. The belief in immortality and the profound care with which the dead were prepared for the afterlife highlighted the Egyptians' understanding of the cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth. They are a testament to the Egyptians' deep understanding of the afterlife, their dedication to preserving the soul, and their vision of immortality. These practices, as they are rediscovered and reinterpreted, continue to shape our own ideas about death, the afterlife, and the eternal nature of the soul. The spiritual legacy of ancient Egypt, embodied in their burial practices, lives on today, offering timeless insights into the human experience. The legacy of Egypt's reverence for death has helped shape modern ideas of life's purpose and the inevitability of death, offering a timeless reflection on the human condition. By preserving the body and providing for the soul's journey, the Egyptians ensured that death was not an end. Modern funeral practices, while markedly different, still carry echoes of Egyptian ideas such as the importance of rituals, the belief in a journey after death, and the desire to ensure the deceased's continued existence in the spiritual realm. The ways in which cultures around the world honor the dead through monuments, ceremonies, and offerings are all influenced, in part, by ancient Egyptian practices, but a continuation where the soul could reach divine union and eternal peace. Through their intricate rituals and monumental tombs, the Egyptians created a system of beliefs and practices that transcended the confines of their time and place. These practices continue to inspire, educate, and fascinate, ensuring that the ancient Egyptians' understanding of life and death remains as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago. This view, expressed through the grandeur of the pyramids, the mummification process, and the offerings placed within tombs, continues to capture the modern imagination. The influence of Egyptian burial rituals on modern art is particularly evident in the Art Deco movement, which borrowed heavily from Egyptian motifs following the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb. This style of design, with its geometric patterns and use of Egyptian imagery, is just one example of how the cultural impact of Egyptian burial practices transcends time. The imagery of the pharaohs, their grand tombs, and the treasures buried with them continues to appear in films, literature, and art. Hollywood blockbusters, like the Mummy franchise, and other adventure films, tap into the mystique surrounding ancient Egyptian tombs, blending the allure of treasure hunting with the ancient beliefs in death and resurrection. These depictions, while reflect the ongoing fascination with Egyptian burial practices and the mysterious, otherworldly aura surrounding the ancient civilization. The richness of these burial practices and the craftsmanship of the tombs have inspired generations of historians, archaeologists, and artists, ensuring that the legacy of ancient Egypt remains ever relevant in contemporary discussions of spirituality, death, and immortality. Virtually untouched by tomb robbers, provided an unprecedented look into the splendor of royal Egyptian burial customs. Inside the tomb, Carter found a wealth of treasures. Golden masks, intricate jewelry, exquisite chests, and detailed furniture, every item placed there to ensure the young king's successful passage into the afterlife. This remarkable find, alongside the countless other tombs and burial sites that have been excavated over the years, has given modern scholars and the public alike a deeper understanding of the Egyptians' complex views on death, the afterlife, and immortality. Shape our understanding of death and spark a fascination with ancient Egypt that shows no sign of fading. This enduring allure has kept Egypt at the center of archaeological research, popular culture, and spiritual exploration. Rediscovery and modern fascination. The modern fascination with Egyptian burial practices can largely be traced to the rediscovery of their tombs and the treasures hidden within them. The discovery of these tombs has allowed modern archaeology to uncover not just material goods, but also the rituals and beliefs that accompanied them. Cultural influence. The influence of Egyptian burial practices extends far beyond the confines of academia and archaeology. Moreover, Egyptian art and symbolism continue to influence contemporary design. The Egyptian approach to death and the afterlife has also influenced philosophical and religious discussions on immortality, especially in Western thought. Continuing legacy. The legacy of Egyptian burial practices remains a central aspect of the nation's culture. These burial practices also exemplify the Egyptians' sophisticated understanding of human existence. In contemporary culture, Egypt's influence on how we view death and immortality is undeniable. Ultimately, the enduring mystique of Egyptian burial practices lies in their ability to speak to universal themes of mortality, legacy, and the human desire for continuity beyond death. In conclusion, the tombs, rituals, and beliefs of ancient Egypt represent an enduring legacy that continues to captivate the world. The pharaohs of ancient Egypt were not merely political rulers, they were considered living gods, the divine representatives of the gods on earth. This combination of earthly power and spiritual authority made the role of the pharaoh one of the most unique in history, establishing Egypt as a civilization where governance, religion, and the spiritual realm were seamlessly intertwined. The pharaoh was a symbol of both political stability and cosmic order, and their influence pervaded every aspect of Egyptian life. As the political leader of the nation, the pharaoh had absolute control over the government, military, and economy. However, the pharaoh was also viewed as a divine figure, with spiritual power over the lives of both the living and the dead. Ra, the pharaoh, was often depicted as the son of Ra, a direct descendant of the god. For example, the pharaoh would often perform rituals to appease the gods, ensure the flooding of the Nile, and secure the agricultural prosperity of Egypt. In these rituals, the pharaoh was not merely an observer but an active participant who embodied the will of the gods. The pharaoh held absolute power over all aspects of Egyptian society, from the military to religious life, from law to diplomacy. This centralized power was necessary for maintaining the stability of Egypt, which was a kingdom that spanned thousands of years and weathered numerous invasions, rebellions, and natural disasters. As the supreme military commander, the pharaoh's responsibility was not only to protect Egypt from external threats, but also to expand its territory when necessary. Military campaigns were seen as divine acts, sanctioned by the gods. Pharaohs like Ramses II, for example, led expansive military campaigns to defend Egypt's borders and to assert its dominance in the region. Unlike rulers in other civilizations, who derived their power from either military conquest or dynastic succession, the pharaoh's authority came directly from the gods. As the living embodiment of the divine, the pharaoh was seen as a mediator between the human realm and the spiritual world. They performed daily rituals in the temples, made offerings to the gods, and oversaw major religious festivals. They were often depicted with symbols of divinity, such as the crook and flail, the peachant, and the cartouche bearing their royal name. These symbols reinforced the belief that the pharaoh was not merely a human ruler but a god incarnate. The most famous of these festivals was the Sed festival, which was held to celebrate the pharaoh's continued reign and divine favor. The tombs of the pharaohs were built as eternal resting places, reflecting the belief that the pharaoh would continue to rule in the afterlife, ensuring the continued prosperity of Egypt. The pyramids, with their monumental scale, were symbols of the pharaoh's divine immortality, designed to preserve the body for eternity and facilitate the soul's passage to the afterlife. During the festival, the pharaoh was ritually rejuvenated, symbolizing their divine connection and the renewal of their power. As both rulers and gods, the pharaohs shaped the course of Egyptian civilization through their central role in governance, religion, and military leadership. Their divine authority was the foundation of Egypt's stability and prosperity, as it was believed that the pharaoh's actions upheld the cosmic order. From their role as high priests to their military exploits, the pharaoh's power transcended mere earthly governance, making them the living embodiment of the gods on earth. This divine kingship not only legitimized their rule but also ensured Egypt's enduring legacy as one of the greatest civilizations in history. This festival was essential for reaffirming the pharaoh's status as the divine ruler of Egypt. The pharaoh's role was not just to rule but to represent the god's will on earth. These military victories were seen as evidence of the pharaoh's divine favor and were often commemorated through monuments and inscriptions. Ra was the supreme god of the Egyptian pantheon, associated with creation, life, and the sun. The pharaoh's role was to uphold Ra's divine order, ensuring the regular flooding of the Nile, which brought life-giving water and fertile soil to Egypt. The pharaoh's role was deeply linked to the agricultural cycle, which was essential to Egypt's survival. The annual inundation of the Nile was seen as a divine blessing, and the pharaoh's ability to ensure that this event occurred was one of the primary signs of their power. This reinforced the belief that the pharaoh's power was both earthly and celestial, an essential link between the divine and human realms. From the viziers who helped administer the state to the scribes who recorded laws, taxes, and decrees, the pharaoh was at the helm of a highly organized government. While the pharaoh's decisions were final, they relied on their advisors and officials to carry out the daily governance of Egypt, ensuring that their will was enacted across the kingdom, and their role in society was to maintain the divine order established by Ra. This connection gave the pharaoh divine legitimacy, ensuring that their rule was never questioned and that their actions were seen as the will of the gods. The legitimacy of the pharaoh's rule was not based merely on military conquest or inheritance. It was rooted in a divine mandate, which meant that the pharaoh's actions were inherently linked to spiritual matters. The king's word was law, and his decisions were final. This made the pharaoh the highest legal authority, presiding over matters of state and ensuring that justice was served in accordance with divine principles. The pharaoh's word carried the weight of Mahat, the principle of truth, balance, and cosmic order. Therefore, when the pharaoh ruled, they were seen as maintaining the natural order of the universe. If the pharaoh's rule faltered or if their actions were unjust, it was believed that the balance of the cosmos would be disrupted, leading to calamities such as famine, disease, or war. The pharaoh's dual role as a secular ruler and a divine god was reflected in the Egyptian concept of kingship, where the king's authority was not just granted by the people but by the gods themselves. From warfare to law, religion to agriculture, the pharaoh's role as both a ruler and a god shaped Egyptian society for millennia. On the one hand, the pharaoh's role as a political leader made them responsible for managing the affairs of the state, governing the people, waging war, overseeing economic activities, and administering justice. But as the embodiment of the gods, the pharaoh also held spiritual responsibility. It was believed that the pharaoh's actions directly affected the balance of the cosmos known as Mortand, the well-being of the nation. The pharaoh was seen as the protector of Egypt, the one who upheld order and harmony in the world. Without the pharaoh, there would be chaos, both in society and in the natural world. This dual role played a pivotal part in the cohesion and stability of Egypt, and remains one of the most enduring aspects of ancient Egyptian civilization. The dual role of the pharaoh in ancient Egypt was unparalleled in its scope and influence. This unique combination of power had profound implications for Egyptian society. The duality of the pharaoh's role is perhaps most vividly exemplified by their symbolic connection to the sun god. In practice, this divine kingship was enforced by the pharaoh's role in religious ceremonies, particularly those that maintained the relationship between Egypt and its gods. Centralized power at the core of the pharaoh's role was a centralized system of governance that placed all authority in the hands of the king. The centralized structure meant that the pharaoh was not only the ruler but also the ultimate arbiter of justice. The pharaoh's military leadership was another key aspect of their centralized power. In the administration of Egypt, the pharaoh had an extensive bureaucracy at their disposal. Divine kingship. The pharaoh as the embodiment of the gods. The idea of divine kingship was central to the legitimacy of the pharaoh's rule. The connection between the pharaoh and the sun god Ra was particularly significant. The pharaoh was also the head of Egypt's religious practices. One of the most notable aspects of Egyptian divine kingship was the idea of the pharaoh as a god on earth. In death, the pharaoh's divine nature did not cease. The pharaohs of ancient Egypt held an unparalleled position of power, combining political authority with divine kingship. In ancient Egypt, the pharaoh was not just the political ruler of the land, but also its divine representative, embodying the will and power of the gods. The pharaoh's divine kingship was central to Egyptian society, and their reign was seen as both a spiritual and temporal mandate. The pharaoh was believed to be the earthly manifestation of the gods, a direct link between the divine and mortal realms. Horus was one of the most important deities in the Egyptian pantheon, symbolizing kingship, protection, and divine order. It was believed that the first pharaoh was the first ruler to unite Upper and Lower Egypt under the protection of Horus, and Lower Egypt, symbolizing their role as the unifier of the land and as the divine ruler. This name linked the ruler directly to the divine Horus, solidifying their godly role. The pharaoh was not just the ruler of the land, they were believed to hold divine authority granted by Horus himself, ensuring that Egypt's prosperity and stability were maintained through the ruler's divine guidance. Osiris was one of the most important gods in Egyptian religion, associated with death, rebirth, and the afterlife. He was killed by his brother Set, the god of chaos, and his body was scattered across Egypt. While Horus represented the pharaoh's life and reign, Osiris represented the pharaoh's death and resurrection, symbolizing the eternal continuity of their divine kingship. The pharaoh's tomb was not just a resting place, but a spiritual portal to the afterlife, where they would join the gods in eternal life, continuing to protect and govern Egypt from beyond the grave. This belief in the pharaoh's immortality ensured that the ruler's power would not end with their physical death, but would persist in the divine realm, where they would continue to be an essential part of Egypt's cosmic order. This festival was typically held after the pharaoh had ruled for 30 years, and it symbolized the rejuvenation of the pharaoh's strength and power. The festival allowed the pharaoh to renew their divine mandate, demonstrating their ongoing favor with the gods and their continued role in maintaining the cosmic order. As the earthly embodiment of the gods, the pharaoh-esque connection to Horus during their reign, and Osiris, after their death ensured divine order. The rituals and ceremonies performed by the pharaoh were essential in maintaining this connection, reinforcing their divine authority and ensuring the prosperity and stability of Egypt. The pharaoh was not simply a political leader but a living god, whose role in both life and death was crucial to the ongoing health of the nation. This divine kingship was central to Egypt's worldview and served as the foundation of their enduring belief in immortality, cosmic order, and the continued influence of the pharaohs beyond death. The pharaoh's participation in such rituals emphasized their central role in Egypt's religious and social life, reinforcing the belief that the pharaoh was not just a ruler, but a divine figure whose authority was absolute and unchallenged. During the Hebsed festival, the pharaoh would undergo symbolic acts, such as running or walking in ceremonial circles, which represented their continued ability to protect and govern Egypt. The Hebsed festival reinforced the idea of the pharaoh's divine nature, ensuring that the pharaoh's power would remain strong and that Egypt would continue to prosper under their rule. However, Osiris's wife, Isis, and his sister Nephthys, along with their divine allies, were able to resurrect him, making him the god of the afterlife. The pharaoh, in death, was believed to undergo a similar transformation, becoming Osiris, and entering the realm of the gods. Every day, the pharaoh performed rituals and made offerings to the gods, both to sustain their own divine power and to ensure Egypt's prosperity. The daily rituals took place in the great temples dedicated to the gods, where the pharaoh was believed to commune directly with the divine. This association with Osiris reinforced the idea that the pharaoh's reign did not end with their death, but continued in the afterlife. Ensuring the ongoing stability and prosperity of Egypt, the pharaoh would offer sacrifices to the gods, particularly to Ra, Osiris, and other deities, in order to secure divine favor for Egypt. These offerings, which often included food, incense, and sacred objects, were intended to ensure the well-being of the nation and the continued prosperity of the land. The pharaoh's personal participation in these ceremonies was vital, as it demonstrated their direct connection to the gods and their responsibility to maintain divine order. He was seen as the ruler of the underworld and the judge of the dead, overseeing the soul's passage into eternity. The pharaoh's connection to Osiris symbolized the continuity of life and death, reflecting the cyclical nature of existence in Egyptian thought. Horus was not only a god of kingship, but also of the natural order, and the pharaoh, as Horus on earth, was responsible for the well-being of Egypt, ensuring the annual flooding of the Nile, agricultural prosperity, and military victories. And this divine connection became central to the legitimacy of subsequent rulers. Horus was seen as a warrior god who triumphed over chaos and disorder, and in assuming the title of Horus, the pharaoh was also seen as the protector of Egypt, responsible for maintaining peace and stability. As the living Horus, the pharaoh's role was to uphold Mahat, ensuring the continued harmony of the cosmos. Horus, as a god, was often depicted as a falcon or as a man with the head of a falcon, and this imagery was directly associated with the power and protection the pharaoh provided to the land. This divine kingship was not merely a title but a deeply ingrained belief that permeated Egyptian culture, politics, and religion. The pharaoh's role as a god was integral to Egypt's stability, ensuring that cosmic order was maintained and that the land flourished. In this section, we will explore the pharaoh's divine connection to the gods, focusing on their association with Horus during their reign and Osiris after their death, as well as their religious duties and the ceremonies that reinforced their godlike status. Pharaoh as Horus, the falcon god of the sky during their reign. The pharaoh was considered the earthly incarnation of Horus, the falcon-headed god of the sky. The pharaoh's connection to Horus was not just symbolic, but also a source of their divine legitimacy. Throughout their reign, the pharaoh was depicted with the symbol of Horus, often shown wearing the double crown of upper. The connection between the pharaoh and Horus was reinforced in royal titles such as Horus' name, which every pharaoh assumed upon ascending to the throne. Pharaoh and Osiris, the god of the afterlife upon their death. The pharaoh's divine association shifted from Horus to Osiris, the god of the afterlife and resurrection. Osiris's death and resurrection were central themes in Egyptian religion. The transition from Horus to Osiris was an essential aspect of the pharaoh's role. Rituals and ceremonies. The religious duties of the pharaoh's religious duties, were an integral part of their kingship, reinforcing their divine role and maintaining Egypt's connection to the gods. The pharaoh's primary role in religious ceremonies was to serve as the intermediary between the gods and the people. One of the most important religious ceremonies in the life of the pharaoh was the Hebsed, a celebration of the pharaoh's continued vitality and divine rule. The Hebsed was not just a physical act but also a spiritual one, as it reaffirmed the pharaoh's connection to the gods. The divine kingship of the pharaohs was a cornerstone of ancient Egyptian society, shaping not only their governance but also the spiritual and cultural life of the nation. The pharaoh's relationship with the gods was not only central to their personal identity, but also to their authority. As rulers of ancient Egypt, the pharaoh was seen as the direct intermediary between the divine and the mortal realms, tasked with ensuring that the god's will was carried out and that the land of Egypt remained prosperous and in harmony. This relationship was not just symbolic, it was a vital part of the pharaoh's divine kingship, reinforcing their role as both a political leader and a god on earth. As the highest religious figure in the land, the pharaoh was responsible for overseeing religious rituals, conducting ceremonies, and ensuring that the gods were honored. While Egypt had a vast priesthood dedicated to specific gods, it was the pharaoh who stood at the head of this religious hierarchy. They were the ultimate authority in matters of divine worship, and their actions in the temples were seen as directly affecting the prosperity of the nation. The construction and maintenance of these temples, as well as the performance of the associated rituals, were believed to be directly tied to the well-being of the nation. A pharaoh who neglected these duties or failed to perform the required rituals risked losing the favor of the gods, and, in turn, jeopardizing the stability of Egypt itself. The pharaoh's spiritual duties, including their role as high priest, and the belief that their rule was sustained by divine approval, played a crucial role in maintaining the pharaoh's authority and Egypt's stability. Role as high priest, Egyptians saw the pharaoh as the earthly manifestation of divine power, and their authority was sustained by the belief that they were divinely chosen to rule. The people of Egypt viewed their pharaoh as their divine protector, and if they felt that the gods had abandoned the ruler, the people might question the legitimacy of the pharaoh's rule. The pharaoh's responsibility was not just to govern but to act as the guarantor of Egypt's prosperity and divine protection. It was not just a personal identifier but a representation of their divine kingship and connection to the gods. The royal titulary, the collection of names and titles adopted by the pharaoh upon ascending the throne, was a powerful symbol of their divine authority, and ensuring that their rule was seen as sanctioned by divine authority. The name was often inscribed on monuments, statues, and temple walls, ensuring that the pharaoh's connection to the gods was visible to the people and to future generations. This connection was further solidified through the use of divine imagery such as the ankh, the scarab, and the crook and flail that adorned the pharaoh's name, reinforcing their status as a divine figure. The most important of these titles was Niset, Biti, King of Upper. The construction of monumental tombs and temples was part of the pharaoh's efforts to immortalize their divine connection and ensure that their reign would be remembered as a time of divine favor. The pharaoh's name, like their divine kingship, was eternal, and it was believed that their influence would continue in the afterlife, where they would join the gods in eternal rule. In Lower Egypt, which reflected the pharaoh's unification of the two lands of Egypt, symbolizing their dominion over the entire country. As the high priest of Egypt, the pharaoh conducted religious ceremonies, made offerings, and performed rituals to ensure that the gods' favor was maintained. The pharaoh's success was directly tied to their ability to maintain divine approval, and failure to do so could result in a loss of authority and the disintegration of Egypt's prosperity. The pharaoh's name, tied to divine attributes, was more than just a personal identifier. The pharaoh's role as the living embodiment of divine power made their relationship with the gods both a spiritual obligation and a political necessity, ensuring that Egypt's cosmic order and stability were upheld for as long as they reigned. If a pharaoh failed to meet these expectations, the social order could be threatened. Pharaohs would often commemorate military victories, successful agricultural seasons, and other signs of prosperity with inscriptions that attributed their success to divine favor. The pharaoh's relationship with the divine was central to their rule, and their legitimacy was inseparable from their perceived divine favor. For example, military victories were often attributed to the intervention of the gods, with a pharaoh depicted as receiving direct guidance or assistance from gods like Amun or Ra in battle. As the living god of Egypt, the pharaoh's reign was a reflection of the god's favor. The Horus name was crucial in legitimizing the pharaoh's rule, as it tied them to the divine lineage of the gods, and confirmed their position as the earthly embodiment of divine authority. In addition to the Horus name, pharaohs often adopted other names, such as the Nedi name, the Golden Horus name, and a successful reign marked by prosperity, military victory, and the continued flourishing of the land was seen as evidence of divine approval, while failure such as famine, defeat in battle, or natural disasters could be interpreted as a sign that the gods had withdrawn their support. The pharaoh's role as the high priest of Egypt was a central part of their spiritual and political authority. The pharaoh's role as high priest was not a symbolic title but an essential part of their duty to maintain to divine order and balance of the cosmos. If Egypt faced a period of famine, plague, or defeat in war, it was sometimes viewed as the result of the pharaoh's failure to maintain divine order. This belief placed enormous pressure on the pharaoh to not only govern effectively, but to maintain a deep, personal connection to the gods. Failure to do so could result in public criticism and even a loss of political legitimacy. Each day, the pharaoh performed rituals in the temples dedicated to Egypt's gods, particularly Ra, Amen, Osiris, and Horus. These rituals were designed to appease the gods, ensuring their favor and protection for the land. It was believed that the gods had the power to bring blessings or curses upon Egypt, and the pharaoh's actions were vital in maintaining their goodwill. In addition to daily temple rituals, the pharaoh would lead major religious festivals, such as the Opet festival, which celebrated the gods, Aman-Mut and Khonsu, or the Hebsed festival, which marked the rejuvenation of the pharaoh's divine power after 30 years of rule. These festivals were grand events in which the pharaoh not only renewed their own divine strength, but also reaffirmed their connection to the gods and to Mut. The temples were the spiritual heart of Egypt, and the pharaoh was its chief priest. Divine approval and its consequences. The pharaoh's rule was inextricably linked to the belief in divine approval. This belief in divine approval was reflected in the way the pharaoh's achievements were depicted in inscriptions, monuments, and temple relief. In times of hardship, the failure to maintain Mawat could lead to a loss of the god's protection. One of the most significant consequences of losing divine favor was the potential for rebellion or upheaval. The belief in divine approval also meant that the pharaoh was not just a ruler who served at the will of the people, but rather someone who was accountable to the gods. Pharaoh's name and connection to the gods. The pharaoh's name was of immense spiritual significance. Pharaohs also took a Horus name, which directly linked them to the god Horus, representing their role as the divine ruler on earth. The name of the pharaoh, therefore, was not just an administrative title, it was a divine symbol. Connecting the pharaoh to the gods, pharaohs took great care in preserving their names and legacy, ensuring that their names would endure for eternity. The pharaoh's relationship with the gods was central to their rule, shaping their governance, spiritual duties, and legitimacy as Egypt's divine ruler. The pharaoh of ancient Egypt was the supreme authority in all aspects of Egyptian society, and their political and military role was central to the nation's stability and prosperity. As the living embodiment of the gods, the pharaoh's leadership extended far beyond spiritual duties, encompassing military command, governance, and diplomacy. The pharaoh was responsible not only for defending Egypt from external threats, but also for ensuring internal peace and maintaining the systems of administration and justice. This dual responsibility made the pharaoh not only a divine figure, but also a powerful political and military leader. Military campaigns were not only a matter of strategic conquest, but also a demonstration of the pharaoh's divine power. They were often depicted on the front lines of battles, leading their troops into war. Their presence on the battlefield was seen as a crucial element of victory, as it reinforced the belief that the pharaoh's divine strength and authority were directly responsible for military success. Their campaigns not only expanded Egypt's territory, but also solidified the pharaoh's divine status and reinforced their role as the protector of Egypt. One of his most notable victories came at the Battle of Megiddo, in which he decisively defeated a coalition of Canaanites. The battle was of immense strategic significance, as it secured Egyptian control over Qumran and opened the way for Egyptian influence over the Levant. Victories were not only important for expanding Egypt's territory and securing resources, They were crucial for reinforcing the pharaoh's divine legitimacy. Military campaigns were seen as divinely sanctioned events, and the pharaoh's success in battle was proof that they were favored by the gods. Diplomacy was an essential aspect of the pharaoh's power, and alliances with neighboring kingdoms were often crucial for maintaining Egypt's security and influence. Marriage alliances, trade agreements, and political diplomacy were all tools used by the pharaoh to solidify Egypt's position in the ancient world. Thutmose's victory was not just a military triumph, it was also a divine validation of his kingship. The pharaoh's role in managing these relationships was critical for maintaining Egypt's dominance in the region. Military campaigns in Nubia and the Levant were often followed by diplomatic efforts to secure Egypt's influence over these territories. The construction of fortresses and the establishment of trade routes were essential for consolidating Egypt's power, and the pharaoh's role as both a warrior and diplomat was key to maintaining control. The pharaoh often formed alliances with neighboring rulers by marrying their daughters or sisters. Land was either directly controlled by the state or granted to nobles and officials in exchange for their service. The pharaoh's judgment was considered final, and their decisions were seen as divinely inspired. The pharaoh's role in the legal system was critical for maintaining order in the kingdom and ensuring that the principles of justice and balance were upheld. Laws were enforced through a system of local officials who reported directly to the pharaoh's court. The pharaoh also controlled the allocation of resources, ensuring that the needs of the people were met. As commander-in-chief, the pharaoh led military campaigns that were seen as divine missions, and their victories were viewed as signs of divine favor. Diplomacy played a vital role in maintaining Egypt's influence and security, with marriage alliances and trade agreements solidifying Egypt's position in the ancient world. Domestically, the pharaoh's oversight of Egypt's bureaucracy, land distribution, and legal system ensured the stability and prosperity of the nation. The pharaoh's role as both a political leader and a living god was crucial in maintaining Egypt's power, and their influence permeated every aspect of Egyptian life. Whether leading armies into battle or managing the affairs of the state, the pharaoh was both a divine ruler and a practical leader, ensuring Egypt's continued greatness for centuries, and that the gods were properly honored with offerings of food, goods, and labor. These marriages helped to solidify political relations and ensure peace with powerful neighbors. The pharaoh's role in overseeing the administration of Egypt's vast territories was integral to ensuring the prosperity of the land and the well-being of its people. They relied on a complex bureaucracy to manage the country's affairs, from the collection of taxes to the distribution of land and resources. The viziers, who were the pharaoh's chief officials, played a vital role in managing the day-to-day administration. These officials oversaw the work of scribes, who kept records of taxes, agricultural output, and legal matters. The efficiency of this bureaucracy ensured that Egypt's economy ran smoothly, and that the pharaoh's rule was maintained throughout the land. For example, Ramses II married several foreign princesses, including a Hittite princess, in a diplomatic effort to secure peace and trade between Egypt and the Hittite Empire. These alliances were not just political but were also seen as spiritual bonds, as the pharaoh's marriage to a foreign princess symbolized the union of Egypt with the divine order of the cosmos. The battle was seen as a manifestation of divine power, with Thutmose's role as the earthly representative of the gods, ensuring that Egypt triumphed over its enemies. The pharaoh's military victories, such as Megiddo, were often inscribed on monuments and temples, where they were depicted as divine triumphs. The victorious campaign was seen as the god's will and proof of the pharaoh's ability to uphold the cosmic order that kept Egypt and the world in balance. Egypt's economy depended on trade with neighboring regions, including Nubia, Mesopotamia, and the Levant. The pharaoh played a central role in maintaining these trade relationships, which brought wealth and resources to Egypt. Tributes from conquered lands or allied states were also essential for demonstrating Egypt's dominance and divine favor. The wealth generated from these trade relations was used to fund military campaigns, religious rituals, and monumental construction projects. Although the battle ended in a stalemate, Ramses II famously portrayed it as a victory in his inscriptions and monuments. The battle's significance lies not only in its military context, but also in the way it was used to solidify Ramses II's divine authority. After the battle, Ramses negotiated a peace treaty with the Hittites, marking one of the earliest known peace treaties in history. This diplomatic achievement was seen as another reflection of his divine wisdom and power. Ramses' portrayal of the battle as a divine victory helped cement his legacy as one of Egypt's greatest pharaohs. With his military prowess and leadership depicted as a sign of divine favor, the pharaoh's military victories were celebrated as signs of divine favor, and military defeats, on the other hand, could be interpreted as a loss of divine support, threatening the stability of the nation. Military leadership. The commander-in-chief, the pharaoh's military role was one of their most important responsibilities. As commander-in-chief of Egypt's military forces, the pharaoh led their armies into battle and was expected to ensure Egypt's security. In times of war, the pharaoh was viewed as the ultimate protector of Egypt, tasked with defending the nation from foreign invaders and expanding Egypt's territory when necessary. The military prowess of the pharaohs was essential to maintaining the divine order, as the pharaoh's success in warfare was believed to be a direct reflection of divine favor. The pharaoh's military leadership was intertwined with their role as a living god. Pharaohs were not merely they actively participated in military campaigns. Military campaigns and their significance. Some of the most famous military campaigns in Egyptian history were led by pharaohs such as Thutmose III and Ramses II, both of whom were regarded as military geniuses. Thutmose III and the Battle of Megiddo. Thutmose III, often referred to as the Napoleon of Egypt, led a series of military campaigns that expanded Egypt's borders to their greatest extent. Ramses II and the Battle of Kadesh. Perhaps the most famous battle in Egyptian history is the Battle of Kadesh, fought by Ramses II against the Hittite Empire. These campaigns, and others like them, demonstrated the pharaoh's role as both a military leader and a divine protector. Diplomatic relations, alliances, and foreign policy. In addition to military leadership, the pharaoh also played a critical role in managing Egypt's diplomatic relations. Marriage alliances. One of the most common diplomatic strategies was marriage, trade, and tribute. Diplomacy was also important for securing trade routes and acquiring valuable resources. Nubia and the Levant. Egypt has relationships with its southern neighbors in Nubia and the northern kingdoms of the Levant were particularly important. Domestic governance, overseeing the bureaucracy. While the pharaoh's military and diplomatic responsibilities were crucial, domestic governance was equally important for maintaining Egypt's stability. Administration and bureaucracy. The pharaoh was the supreme ruler of Egypt, and their decisions affected all aspects of Egyptian society. Land and resources. The pharaoh was responsible for overseeing the distribution of land, which was the main source of wealth in ancient Egypt. Justice and law. As the highest legal authority in Egypt, the pharaoh was responsible for administering justice. The pharaoh's political and military responsibilities were inseparable from their divine kingship. The pharaoh's influence extended far beyond the political and military realms, reaching into every facet of Egyptian society and culture. As the divine ruler of Egypt, the pharaoh was not just a political leader but a central figure in the cultural, social, and economic fabric of the nation. Their patronage of the arts, involvement in monumental construction projects, and symbolic role as the unifying figure of Egypt shaped the civilization in profound ways. The pharaohs were not only rulers, but also major supporters of artistic expression, commissioning grand works that would immortalize their reign and reinforce their divine status. This patronage extended to a wide range of artistic forms, including sculpture, painting, literature, music, and architecture. The grandeur of these tombs was intended to ensure that the pharaoh's soul would live on for eternity, serving as a testament to their reign and divine connection. The intricate wall paintings, carvings, and inscriptions found in these tombs often depicted the pharaoh's journey to the afterlife, emphasizing their divinity and eternal role in maintaining cosmic balance. The artistic projects sponsored by the pharaohs were not just expressions of luxury. They were deeply symbolic, serving both religious and political purposes. The pharaoh was the sole ruler who unified the upper and lower regions of Egypt, and their image was used as a unifying force, both politically and socially. Statues of the pharaoh were erected in temples, public spaces, and even in the homes of the common people, reinforcing their divine authority. The pharaoh's name, title, and image were inscribed on countless temples, statues, and public works. Monumental building projects, such as the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza by Pharaoh Khufu or the temples of Ramses II at Abu Simbel, were symbols of Egypt's strength and cohesion. These projects were often depicted as collaborative efforts, emphasizing the unity of the people under the leadership of the pharaoh. Each of these symbols served to remind the people of the pharaoh's sacred role and divine nature, linking them to both the gods and the cosmic order. They were intended not only to honor the gods and the pharaoh, but to instill a sense of national pride and unity among the people of Egypt. The crook, resembling a shepherd's staff, represented the pharaoh's duty to care for and guide the people, while the scepter symbolized their authority and ability to govern. They were integral to the pharaoh's divine identity and served to remind both the people of Egypt and the gods themselves of the pharaoh's sacred duty to protect the land and uphold divine order. Together, these symbols reinforced the pharaoh's divine responsibility to protect and lead Egypt with wisdom and strength. From grand temples to everyday representations in homes and public spaces, the pharaoh's image served as a constant reminder of Egypt's strength and cohesion. Their influence shaped Egypt's art, culture, social structure, and religious life, ensuring that Egypt's civilization endured for thousands of years. The pharaoh's legacy continues to captivate the modern world, with their monumental achievements and divine symbolism offering a glimpse into one of the most powerful and enduring empires in history. The pharaoh's symbols of power, such as the double crown, crook and scepter, and the ankh, reinforced their divine kingship and the cosmic balance they were entrusted to maintain. As the patron of the arts, the pharaoh ensured that Egypt's cultural heritage flourished, commissioning monumental construction projects and supporting artistic expression. Through their patronage of architecture, sculpture, and literature, the pharaohs solidified their legacy as divine rulers and protectors of Egypt. The Pieshand, Upper and Lower Egypt, was a symbol of the pharaoh's dominion over the entirety of Egypt, and it became one of the most enduring symbols of Egyptian kingship. The uraeus, the stylized image of a cobra, was another significant symbol of the pharaoh's power and protection, often placed on the pharaoh's crown or as part of their regalia. The uraeus represented the goddess Wajet, the protector of Lower Egypt, and symbolized the pharaoh's divine protection from harm. Whether carved in stone, painted on the walls of temples, or embossed on seals and coins, the pharaoh's image served as a reminder of the unity of the two lands under their divine rule. Pharaohs were often depicted in idealized forms, larger-than-life figures with elaborate regalia, representing their godlike status. These representations were not just artistic expressions, they were tools of state propaganda, reminding the people of Egypt of the pharaoh's divine power and their role in maintaining the unity and stability of the kingdom. The concept of Egypt as a unified state was intrinsically tied to the pharaoh's reign, and their rule was seen as essential for maintaining harmony across the land. The Book of the Dead, a guide to the afterlife, was one such example of religious literature, commissioned to ensure the smooth transition of the pharaoh's soul to eternity. This crown combined the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt, signifying the pharaoh's dominion over both regions. The crown represented the pharaoh's role as the unifier of the two lands, and their control over the entirety of Egypt. It symbolized the pharaoh's divine right to rule and their connection to both the heavens and the earth. The pharaoh's involvement in the creation and dissemination of these cultural works reinforced their central role in both the spiritual and artistic life of Egypt. The pharaoh's image was omnipresent in Egyptian society, reinforcing their status as both a god and the protector of Egypt. These artistic endeavors were designed to convey the pharaoh's divine nature and their role in maintaining Moat, the cosmic order. Temples such as the Temple of Karnak, constructed by pharaohs like Amenhotep III and Ramses II, were grand expressions of the pharaoh's power, featuring towering obelisks, colossal statues, and intricate reliefs, depicting the pharaoh's divine victories and their relationship with the gods. These temples were not only centers of worship but also symbols of the pharaoh's divine kingship, reflecting their role as the earthly embodiment of the gods. Their symbols of power, their support for artistic expression, and their ability to unify the diverse regions of Egypt helped to solidify their divine authority and influence the cultural identity of the nation. Patronage of the arts. One of the pharaoh's most significant contributions to Egyptian culture was their role as the patron of the arts. Pharaohs commissioned monumental temples, statues, and monuments dedicated to the gods, as well as works that glorified their own reigns. Pharaohs also commissioned large-scale tombs, such as the pyramids and the rock-cut tombs in the Valley of the Kings, which were designed to secure their immortality and reflect their divine status. Literature also flourished under the pharaoh's patronage. with many texts recording the pharaoh's exploits, religious hymns, and stories of divine favor. Pharaohs as symbols of unity. The pharaoh's power was the symbol of Egypt's unity, transcending the various regions, cultures, and peoples that made up the civilization. From the grand temples in Thebes to the humbler homes and rural villages, the pharaoh's image was ubiquitous. Inscriptions and monuments also reinforced the pharaoh's role as the unifier of Egypt. Pharaohs also used state-sponsored art and architecture to reinforce the unity of Egypt in the face of external threats. Cultural symbols of power. The pharaoh's regalia, crowns, scepters, and other royal symbols were essential elements of their divine kingship, reinforcing their authority and connection to the gods. The crowns, the peichant, or double crown, was one of the most significant symbols of the pharaoh's power. The scepter and crook. The scepter and crook were symbols of the pharaoh's role as the shepherd of Egypt. The ankh and uraeus, the ankh, a symbol of life, was often depicted in the pharaoh's hand or around their neck, signifying their role in ensuring the continuation of life. These symbols were not just for decoration but were imbued with spiritual meaning, reinforcing the pharaoh's role as the living god who maintained the balance of the cosmos. The pharaoh's social and cultural influence was profound and far-reaching. The pharaoh's role as a symbol of unity was also central to their influence. Ultimately, the pharaoh was the focal point of Egyptian society, both a political leader and a living god. The pharaohs of ancient Egypt were not only rulers during times of peace and prosperity, but also during crises that threatened the stability of the nation. As the living embodiments of the gods, pharaohs were expected to protect Egypt, uphold law, and restore balance during times of external threats, natural disasters, and internal strife. These challenges required the pharaohs to demonstrate military prowess, strategic thinking, and divine favor in defending Egypt's borders. The Hyksos ruled over parts of Egypt for over a century, until they were eventually driven out by Pharaoh Amosai, who united Upper and Lower Egypt. These groups, believed to have been a coalition of various seafaring peoples from the Mediterranean, posed a serious threat to Egyptian security. Ramses III famously repelled the Sea Peoples in a series of military campaigns, the most famous being the Battle of the Delta, which he depicted as a divine triumph on temple walls at Medinet Habu. In the eyes of the Egyptian people, a victorious pharaoh was one who upheld Ma'at by defending the land and ensuring divine protection against foreign forces. These victories were celebrated as signs of the pharaoh's divine favor, with Ramses III depicted as the earthly agent of the gods, ensuring Egypt's safety and prosperity. Moses' military campaigns were seen as a restoration of Egypt's divine order, as he expelled the foreign invaders and reasserted Egyptian control. For example, Thutmose III, known as the Napoleon of Egypt, led a series of campaigns that extended Egypt's influence across the Levant and into Nubia. The biblical story of the plagues of Egypt, where Pharaoh's refusal to let the Israelites go led to a series of divine punishments, reflects the importance of the pharaoh's role in maintaining the favor of the gods. A failure to restore balance through religious rituals and offerings could lead to the pharaoh's fall from favor, and possibly to rebellion or a loss of political control. When faced with plagues or epidemics, the pharaoh would consult the priests, conduct purification rituals, and offer sacrifices to the gods to restore balance. These actions reinforced the idea that the pharaoh had a spiritual responsibility to ensure Egypt's well-being and prosperity. The pharaoh was expected to restore order during times of political turmoil and ensure the unity of Egypt's people. The ability of a pharaoh to manage internal conflict and maintain Ma'at during such crises was crucial to their legitimacy. These victories not only brought wealth and resources to Egypt, but also reinforced the pharaoh's divine role as a protector and unifier of Egypt and its neighbors. The pharaoh was not only a political leader but also the high priest, responsible for appeasing the gods and restoring order during times of turmoil. Religious ceremonies, offerings, and prayers were essential steps in addressing crime, and the pharaoh's personal participation in these rituals reinforced their connection to the divine. The political instability and fragmentation during this time threatened the unity of the kingdom, and it was only through the military leadership of Amosai that Egypt was reunited. In times of crisis, whether caused by external threats, natural disasters, or internal unrest, the pharaoh's role, as both a military leader and a spiritual guide, was crucial in restoring stability and ensuring Egypt's prosperity. The pharaoh's response to these crises, particularly through religious rituals and ceremonies, reinforced their divine authority and legitimized their reign. Whether facing invasion by foreign armies or internal rebellion, the Pharaohs' ability to restore balance and maintain Egypt's unity was essential to their legacy and the continued stability of the nation. The Pharaohs' role in these ceremonies was symbolic of their power to control both the physical and spiritual realms. This festival, held after a pharaoh had ruled for 30 years, symbolized the renewal of the pharaoh's strength and the restoration of order. The festival's rituals, which included ceremonial running and symbolic acts of renewal, were believed to ensure the pharaoh's continued reign and divine favor. These rituals often involved the offering of sacrifices to the gods, the recitation of prayers, and the performance of symbolic acts to restore cosmic balance. Moses' military success in driving out the Hyksos and re-establishing centralized rule was seen as a divine victory, and his ability to restore unity and stability was celebrated as a key element of his kingship. His success in driving out the Hyksos was celebrated as a divine victory, reinforcing the idea that the pharaoh was not only a military leader but also the chosen representative of the gods who protected Egypt from foreign threats. In times of war, the pharaoh was expected to lead Egypt's military forces, securing both the protection and expansion of the kingdom. These crises, whether caused by foreign invasions, famine, disease, or civil unrest, tested the leadership and divine legitimacy of the pharaohs. The Nile's annual flooding was central to Egypt's agricultural system, and any failure of the floods could lead to crop failure, famine, and social unrest. Ramses III faced a plot by his harem, known as the Harem Conspiracy, which ultimately led to his assassination. Despite this internal turmoil, Ramses III's reign was considered successful due to his ability to maintain Egypt's security through military victories and diplomacy. His efforts to restore order during a period of internal conflict were seen as the pharaoh's duty to uphold Mawat and protect Egypt from both internal and external threats. The pharaoh, as the divine representative on earth, was expected to intervene in such crises and restore Ma'at, ensuring the gods' favor and the land's prosperity. Their ability to respond effectively to such challenges not only shaped their reigns, but also determined their legacy. If the floods failed or were excessive, it was believed that the gods were angry with the pharaoh or with the people of Egypt. A lack of water might cause famine, while an overflow could lead to destructive inundations. Pharaohs responded to these threats by holding elaborate rituals and offering prayers to the gods, particularly Hapi, the god of the Nile's floods. In times of famine, the pharaoh would make offerings to appease the gods and restore the natural balance, often holding festivals or special ceremonies to honor the gods and pray for a bountiful harvest. This section explores how pharaohs responded to crises, how these challenges impacted their rule, and how they used religious symbolism and rituals to restore stability and reaffirm their divine authority. Pharaohs in war, external threats and military campaigns throughout Egypt. The pharaohs faced multiple external threats, ranging from invasions by foreign powers to incursions by neighboring peoples. One of the most notable external threats came from the Hyksos, a foreign Semitic people who invaded Egypt during the Second Intermediate Period. Similarly, Egypt faced invasions by the Sea peoples around the 12th century BC. During the reign of Ramses III, in addition to defending Egypt from invaders, pharaohs also engaged in military campaigns to expand Egypt's territory. These military responses to foreign threats were essential for maintaining Egypt's security and the pharaoh's legitimacy. Famine, flooding, and plague. Natural disasters and divine displeasure. Natural disasters, such as famine, flooding, and plagues, were seen as ominous signs in ancient Egypt, often believed to reflect divine displeasure. The flooding of the Nile was crucial for Egypt's agriculture, as it provided the fertile soil needed for crops. In addition to natural disasters, plagues were seen as another form of divine retribution. These natural disasters not only affected the daily lives of the Egyptians, but also posed a direct challenge to the legitimacy of the pharaoh. Internal strife, political instability, and civil unrest. While external threats and natural disasters were significant challenges, internal strife such as political instability, rebellion, and civil unrest posed a constant threat to the stability of Egypt. One of the most notable periods of internal unrest in Egyptian history was the Second Intermediate Period, when the Hyksos invaders gained control over parts of Egypt. Similarly, during the New Kingdom, the reigns of pharaohs such as Ramses III were marked by internal strife, including conspiracies within the royal court, crisis, and religious symbolism. The pharaoh's role in religious responses in times of crisis. The pharaoh's role in performing religious rituals was paramount. For example, during times of famine, plague, or military defeat, the pharaoh would lead purification rituals to cleanse the land of its perceived impurities and restore divine favor. Rituals performed during the Hebs were another example of how the pharaoh's divine power was rejuvenated during times of crisis. The pharaohs of ancient Egypt were not just political rulers, but divine figures whose authority was deeply intertwined with their ability to maintain the cosmic order. The pharaohs of ancient Egypt left an indelible mark on history, shaping not only the cultural and political landscape of Egypt, but also influencing the broader Mediterranean world. Their reign spanned over 3 millennia, and their monumental achievements in architecture, art, and religion continue to capture the imagination of people today. The pharaoh's legacy, however, was not confined to their earthly reign. It extended far into the afterlife, where their divine kingship and influence were believed to endure forever. These achievements continue to stand as testaments to the grandeur and religious significance of the pharaoh's rule. Among the most iconic of these monuments are the pyramids, the temples, and the tombs that have become synonymous with ancient Egypt. As time passed and Egypt faced external threats and internal change, the power of the pharaohs gradually waned. These tombs were designed to secure the pharaoh's immortality in the afterlife. These statues, often depicting the pharaoh in a larger-than-life form, served to reinforce the pharaoh's divine kingship and remind the people of Egypt of the ruler's power. Obelisks, tall, four-sided, pointed pillars, were erected as symbols of the sun god Ra, and many pharaohs had these massive structures built at temples and other significant locations. The Egyptians believed in an afterlife where the soul would continue to live for eternity, and the pharaoh, as the divine ruler, was believed to maintain their influence even after death. The pharaoh's name and image were immortalized in temples, monuments, and statues, ensuring that their legacy would be remembered for generations. The idea of eternal kingship was central to the pharaoh's rule, and their influence was seen as unbroken, even in death. This belief reinforced the idea that the pharaoh's authority and divine power transcended the physical world, and that they continued to govern Egypt in the afterlife. Though he was hailed as a divine ruler, the Pharaonic line ended with his conquest. Following Alexander's death, Egypt came under the control of the Ptolemaic dynasty, which, although of Greek origin, adopted many Egyptian traditions and maintained the title of pharaohs. The pyramids, temples, and tombs built by the pharaohs remain some of the most iconic and enduring symbols of ancient Egypt. The religious beliefs and practices that underpinned the pharaoh's rule continued to influence later cultures, particularly in the Greco-Roman world, and even today. Egypt's ancient past continues to captivate the imagination of people around the world. The Ptolemies, however, were not true Egyptians, and their rule was marked by political intrigue and instability. Their monumental achievements in architecture, art, and culture continue to shape Egypt's identity and serve as enduring symbols of their divine kingship. The pharaohs' belief in the afterlife ensured their continued influence long after their death, and their tombs and monuments remain testaments to their enduring power and authority. Although the Pharaonic system eventually came to an end, the influence of the pharaohs on Egyptian culture, religion, and society is still felt today. The pharaoh's legacy lives on, not only in the grand structures they built, but also in the spiritual and cultural practices they established, ensuring that Egypt's rich history remains immortal in the modern world. The grandeur of royal tombs and the elaborate burial rituals were designed to ensure the pharaoh's continued presence in the afterlife and to reinforce their eternal rule. These monuments, along with the temples and tombs, continue to be awe-inspiring symbols of the pharaoh's enduring legacy. Over time, Egypt faced invasions, internal strife, and shifts in power that weakened the Pharaonic system. The invasion of the Hyksos during the Second Intermediate Period, the conquest of Alexander the Great in BCE, and the later Roman annexation of Egypt in 30 BCE marked significant turning points in the decline of the pharaoh's power. The pyramids and tombs were filled with treasures, offerings, and symbolic objects meant to provide for the pharaoh's needs in the afterlife. The Book of the Dead, a collection of spells and rituals, Cleopatra's tragic end, marked the end of the Hellenistic period in Egypt and the pharaoh's long reign. The Roman annexation of Egypt signaled the final collapse of the ancient Egyptian monarchy, and Egypt was no longer ruled by its native kings, but became a part of the Roman Empire. It was often placed in the tombs to guide the pharaoh's soul through the challenges of the afterlife and ensure their safe passage to the realm of the gods. and were richly adorned with paintings, carvings, and inscriptions that depicted scenes from the pharaoh's life and religious rituals. The tomb of Tutankhamun, though relatively modest compared to other royal tombs, is one of the most famous due to its discovery in 1920, revealing a wealth of treasures and a glimpse into the burial practices of the pharaohs. Despite the eventual decline of the pharaonic system, the legacy of the pharaohs remains one of the most enduring aspects of ancient Egyptian civilization. Monumental achievements, the pharaohs' most lasting contributions to Egypt's cultural and architectural legacy are the monumental structures and artistic works they commissioned during their reigns. The pyramids, the Great Pyramid of Giza, built for Pharaoh Khufu, is one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world and remains the only one still standing. These pyramids were not only grand burial structures, but also representations of the pharaoh's divine status and eternal reign. The construction of the pyramids required incredible engineering skills and vast labor forces, reflecting the centralization of power under the pharaohs. The pyramids served as eternal resting places for the pharaohs, and their size and complexity were meant to ensure the pharaoh's immortality. Temples at Karnak, the temples of Karnak, particularly the Great Temple of Amun, represent another remarkable achievement of the pharaohs. These temples, built and expanded over centuries by various pharaohs, were not only places of worship but also symbols of the divine power of the pharaohs. The sheer scale of the Karnak complex, with its towering obelisks, massive columns, and intricate relief, reflects the grandeur of the pharaoh's rule. The temples were central to the religious life of Egypt, and their construction emphasized the pharaoh's role as both the divine ruler and the high priest of Egypt. The tombs in the Valley of the Kings, the tombs of the pharaohs in the Valley of the Kings, particularly those of the New Kingdom, are among the most significant architectural achievements in Egyptian history. Monumental statues and obelisks. The pharaohs also commissioned monumental statues and obelisks that were placed throughout Egypt. Pharaohs in the afterlife. The legacy of the pharaohs was not confined to their earthly reigns. The pharaoh's tomb was not just a place of burial but a spiritual portal that allowed the deceased ruler to continue their role in maintaining Mahat. The belief in the pharaoh's immortality extended beyond death, as it was believed that the pharaoh's divine soul would continue to protect and govern Egypt. The end of the pharaohs. Despite their immense power and influence, the reign of the pharaohs eventually came to an end. The conquest of Alexander the Great. In 332 BCE, Alexander the Great conquered Egypt and was welcomed as a liberator. Roman annexation. The final end of the pharaonic system came in 30 BCE, when Egypt became a province of the Roman Empire following the death of Cleopatra VII, the last of the Ptolemaic rulers. Despite the fall of the pharaohs, the legacy of ancient Egypt endured through its culture, religion, and monumental achievements. The legacy of the pharaohs is one of the most remarkable in world history. The pharaohs' roles as divine rulers, military leaders, cultural symbols, and guardians of Egypt's stability shaped the course of ancient Egyptian history for millennia. As both earthly monarchs and living gods, their influence permeated every aspect of Egyptian society, from the political and military spheres to the spiritual and cultural realms. These architectural marvels not only served as expressions of their divine kingship, but also as spiritual portals ensuring their immortality in the afterlife. The grandeur of these works, alongside the pharaoh's extensive patronage of the arts, literature, and religious practices, further solidified their cultural and divine status. Pharaohs were not merely rulers. They were cultural icons whose reigns contributed to the development of Egypt's identity and its role as a beacon of civilization in the ancient world. Their legacy, encapsulated in the awe-inspiring monuments, arts, and religious practices they left behind, continues to captivate the world. Their role as symbols of divine kingship, protectors of Egypt, and creators of a thriving civilization ensures that the pharaoh's power extends far beyond their earthly reigns, shaping the spiritual and cultural fabric of Egypt for generations to come. The pharaohs were central to the unity and prosperity of Egypt, their reigns marking periods of both remarkable achievement and intense challenge. Their ability to maintain cosmic order was seen as the foundation of Egypt's stability. The monumental structures they commissioned, such as the pyramids, temples, and tombs, are enduring symbols of their power and legacy. The pharaoh's military prowess and diplomatic acumen ensured Egypt's security and influence in the ancient world. Through military campaigns, alliances, and diplomatic marriages. They expanded and secured Egypt's borders while maintaining control over neighboring territories. The belief in the pharaohs' eternal rule, reflected in the grandeur of their tombs and the rituals associated with their afterlife, ensured that their legacy remained intact for generations. The pharaohs' divine kingship and monumental achievements were integral to the development of Egypt's culture and identity, and their influence continued to shape the Egyptian worldview long after their earthly reigns came to an end. Their strategic decisions in times of crisis, whether in war, famine, or plague, reinforced their role as the divine protectors of Egypt, with their ability to restore Mayotte during turmoil further solidifying their authority. Even after their reigns ended, the spiritual and cultural influence of the pharaohs continued to resonate throughout Egypt and beyond. Today, the pharaohs remain central figures in the study of ancient Egypt,